Hello, I'm Gil Zilkha. Welcome back to my channel, Essential Classical Music, where we look at the best recordings of the classical music repertoire. So we have now completed most of the major orchestral works, the symphonies, the concertos, the tone poems, and now we are going into one of my favorite genres, chamber music. The name says it all. So you go from the grand hall and you retire to the chamber where you have your closest friends with whom you can make music together in groups of 2 or 3 or 4. Now, technically speaking, chamber music really actually means 3 or more. If you have, like, say, a violinist and a pianist, that's considered solo. Technically speaking, for this video, basically anything instrumental except for solo piano, because that's going to be its own separate thing. Anything instrumental that is in a small group or even just a single player by himself, we're going to call that chamber music for the purposes of this video. And the thing I love about chamber music is that feeling of camaraderie. That you're collaborating, most typically in a string quartet, for example, and you have these 4 minds just joining together where they're collaborating artistically, and it can really make for some fantastic compositions and fantastic results on records, really some fantastic chamber groups. So as always, I'm going to go alphabetically, so we're going to start with Bach. And so we're going to start with one of those strictly solo compositions, and this is a great one. Really, one of the masterworks if you're wanting to appreciate Bach, and that's his 6 cello suites. Now, these were actually brought to the attention of the world essentially by Pablo Casals, the Spanish cellist, who was actually at a thrift shop and discovered an edition of the suites and picked them up and started playing them, and then brought them to everyone's attention. And now pretty much every cellist worth his or her salt is going to want to play the cello suites. They are, strictly speaking, they're dance movements, although that doesn't necessarily mean that it's all, quick and jolly. Sometimes they're more slow and ruminative. There's always a prelude that begins each suite, and then you have some combination of sarabands, courants, gigs, which again can range from fast to slow. Probably the most famous one is the first suite that begins with the da 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 da. Very, very catchy tune. It's often arranged for other instruments. By the way, not to be confused with the opening of the well-tempered clavier. They sound very similar, but they're actually different. They're both arpeggios, but there's slight differences. They're both very catchy works. And then if you're wanting sort of a catchy, fast one in terms of the preludes, the one that begins number 6. By the way, this is my approximatura. I'm not singing the exact notes correctly, but I'm trying to give you an idea of what they sound like. And then one of my favorites is number 2. It's this slow ruminative. Di da 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 di da di da 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 di da di da 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 di da 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 di da di da da da. Anyways, I'm not going to sing the whole thing, but it's very beautiful. I wish I could. Fun fact, I was actually a guinea pig once for a cello masterclass given by the great American cellist Lynn Harrell. They wanted to show this student, give him something to emulate on his cello, so they brought in a bass singer, me, and I sang the Cote aria from Puccini's La Bohème. So that was kind of fun. I got to sort of, sing something that a cellist could emulate. So I feel very much within my rights to sing cello lines, since I have actually done that in a professional capacity before. Anyways, so let's get on to the recordings. My first choice is, it's really sort of the classic version, at least among stereo accounts, and that's the one by Pierre Fournier. recorded in 1961, Deutsche Grammophon. Very good sound, very present and full, and he plays these just masterfully. He had a beautiful tone, wonderful artistry, flexibility, and agility. He knew the works very well. So this is really an ideal starting point if you're wanting to get to know them. Now, the cello suites, it's a very, it's just a person and a cello. So there's so much room for flexibility, so much room for interpretation. So if you love the works, you're going to want more than one. And if you want something that's a little different, this is a more recent version. This is from Jean-Guillaume Queyras, a French cellist. This was recorded in 2007. And he plays it with a little bit more agility. It's a little bit more sparing in tone, partly, and that's sort of the new kind of manner, right? Is to bring the tone down a little bit to allow for a little bit more flexibility and agility. It's very beautiful, very suave. He's really a very musical artist, and it actually makes a really good complement to the Fournier. Now he has come out with another version. We're in the year 2025 now, so just a few months ago, at the end of 24, he came out with another version. That one's also very good. You really can't go wrong with either one. I would say that one, he's, and this is something you can expect sometimes when artists come back years later with another version. He's kind of trying different things. If anything, he's a little bit more free with it. So it's a question of whether you appreciate the greater freedom, or if you're maybe imprinted or more used to this version, some of the things he does may sound a little bit more slightly eccentric, but again, the cello suites, they kind of lend themselves to that individuality. So I would say if you really like this version, you might as well get both. Now, another version that I want to recommend, far different from Jean-Guillaume Queyras, is Mstislav Rostropovich. This came out in 1991. Very good digital sound. And Rostropovich, the big Russian, he just has that beautiful velvety large sound. So not so much on the agility, although he's certainly, he was one of the greatest cellists around, but particularly if you want to enjoy the cello suites in more sort of a straightforward manner, and just luxuriating, if that's a verb, in just the sound of it, Rostropovich gives you that. For example, number 5, which starts out very dramatically, boom, 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 and areas like that. It's just really priceless to hear Rostropovich with his large tone. Now, going back a little bit in time, the early 60s, we have this Mercury version from János Starker, Hungarian cellist. And of course, Mercury Leaving Presence. I'm always touting their sound quality. It's just one of the vintage great sound engineering. So nothing to fault there. And his playing is a little bit faster. It's very assertive, very imaginative. He also was a wonderful artist. Really makes the most of this dance movements. So this is a really wonderful version. He did record it later, I think in like the early 90s for RCA. So that's obviously a more pristine sound. I think he was a little bit more fresh in this version, although they're both excellent. Now, for something a little bit different, from the same time period, early 60s, we have Maurice Gendron. And this is a little bit more like what I was saying about Rostropovich. If you're more into the tone, Gendron plays a really sort of a legato style where everything's more connected, real velvety and suave. It's really beautiful, really elegant, really good sound quality on this too. Early 60s Philips. So again, if you love the beauty of the works, you can't go wrong with this. Now, for something quite different, much newer, we have this recording from 2012 with Peter Wispelwey. Now, Wispelwey, he's recorded it several times. I think this recording, what's label is this here? This is, it's kind of hard to find here, but I think I see in really small print, I think it's called EPR. So sometimes they make this difficult to see. Anyways, he plays in a more kind of shortened, clipped style, great agility, If you like sort of a more assertive style, of course, these are dance suites after all. This is a really exciting version. And then finally, for something very different, we go to the really old classic, one of my favorite classical recordings of all time, and that's of course the person who discovered the suites, Pablo Casals. These come from the late 30s. Fairly clear sounding for the 30s, and of course it's a solo cello, so you don't have to worry about balances or anything like that. And Casals was just a fantastic artist, a real thinking, ruminative artist, especially if you like those thoughtful preludes and the slow movements. Although he's also very imaginative with the faster movements as well. It's just you don't want to miss this. It's the proverbial artist in the dark room alone, with his cello, just emanating just these wonderful insights. And of course you have the authority of being the person who essentially discovered the pieces. So that's really unmissable as well. Okay, so that's the cello suites. Now, so that's this sort of giant, sort of Mount Everest for cellist. Bach also wrote a set of 6 works that are considered the Mount Everest for solo violin. The 3 sonatas and 3 partitas for solo violin. And these are also wonderful works. They also vary between fast and slow. A lot of familiar things like the gavotte and rondo. However, we have to, of course, discuss what is the one single piece that's probably considered the Mount Everest for violin playing. That's the Chausson, which is the final movement of the 2nd partita. This is like one of the great masterworks of all of written music, really. I mean, it's right up there with the Macarena. I mean, well, I'm kidding about the Macarena part. Although they do kind of complement each other. I mean, you have, me Macarena, and then dun, 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 real serious music, the Chausson. It's just, it really takes you for a ride. I mean, it's just... Every time I hear it without fail, no matter how many times, I marvel at just what a composition this is. So that's definitely a highlight. Okay, so of course, there's going to be a slew of violinists who have tackled this work as well. My top choice for this one is Henrik Schering. This is recorded in 1967, Deutsche Grammophon. Good vintage sound, it's in stereo, nice and full, and what Schering brought to it was just a real keen musical mind. He also really did a great job of really finding a balance between virtuosity and also really feeling the music and having a real delicacy as well. The Chausson is wonderfully dramatic. He had a really sweet timbre, but it wasn't like overly sweet. So it's really an ideal version. Now, he did do one in the 50s as well. This is released on Sony. I'm not sure if Sony was the original or not, but it was like 1955. And it's also excellent. The sound it's only slightly a little bit more rough compared to the Deutsche Grammophon. And in terms of interpretation, it's also wonderful. I think of it as just a compliment. If you want to just geek out on sharing Bach versions, you certainly don't need this one, but I think it's really wonderful to hear him when he's slightly younger and slightly fresher. And of course, with all these, there's 6 pieces, there's always different insights you can get from different versions. Now, next, I want to recommend another very famous version. I mentioned it in my Bach references as one of the reference versions of these works, and that's, of course, Nathan Milstein. This is also Deutsche Grammophon. This was recorded in 1973. Very good sound. And Milstein particularly brought that dramatic virtuosity, this real intensity. So it works really well in the Chausson, which is a really serious dramatic work, for example. Another artist with a keen musical mind, very elegant in the way he phrased. So this is also unmissable. And like Schering, there is also a version from the mid-50s that I also want to recommend for Milstein. That's this EMI version. The sound is a little bit more dry. there's a little bit more of an immediacy to his sound. And this one I would say that for me, I tend to favor this one a little bit because there's just a little bit more energy that I detect from Milstein in this. But again, just like with the sharing, if you like them both, you might as well get them both. They're both recommendable. Now, another very famous version is this one from Arthur Grumio. This is from the early 60s, very good Phillips sound, and sort of a contrast to Milstein, I would say. Maybe kind of complements Milstein very well. He's not as assertively dramatic. He's more, Grumio gives you more sort of the unaffected, more natural interpretation. It's very pristine sounding. He had a very beautiful tone. And with works like this, before you know it, you're just, you're under the spell of the music. So that's really a wonderful experience. So these are justly famous recordings. Now, another famous one, this one time in digital sound, this comes from the mid-'80s. It's Art Perlman. Now, Perlman gives you more of the kind of the lush, proverbial romantic view, very sweet-toned, obvious feeling. I know there's at least one, probably several videos of him on YouTube playing the Chausson, and that classic, Perlman, intensity that you see that he's given to the music is all. It's really also unmissable if you love these works. Incidentally, I have to give this little anecdote. Perlman, of course, is Israeli. My family on my father's side is Israeli. And back in the 1950s, my uncle was working in a TV studio. And he was having lunch with my dad, or they were meeting for lunch. And so he told him, "Oh, come over to the studio. I want you to see this kid that we're filming who has polio, and he plays the violin." Didn't give the name, of course, because he wasn't a famous violinist yet. But of course, that was Perlman. So my dad got to go to the studio and watch Perlman in his, I think he's probably like around 13 or something, perform Bach's Gavotte and Rondo, which we talked about. Da, 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 da. So that's really kind of cool. Actually, I'm going to go see Perlman in just a few weeks for my on my birthday weekend. So it's really cool that he's still out there performing after all these, over half a century now. All right, so that's Perlman. Here's a version from the mid-'50s that I want to recommend. Joanna Marzi, wonderful violinist. There's, I think, a box that EMI or Warner EMI has put out that's got most of her recordings. I recommended her Mendelssohn concerto. That's excellent. Her Brahms concerto is also excellent. She has more of a, kind of like Perlman, she has more of a romantic style. Very ruminative. She really thinks deeply, really felt. It's maybe a little bit on the slower side, but if you like that kind of more lush romantic view, this is excellent. The sound is pretty good. It's a little bit more limited because it's the mid-'50s, but it's wonderful artistry. Now, for something quite different, closer to our time, slightly, I guess, the late 90s, we have this version from Rachel Podger. Now, Podger plays Baroque violin, so it's a half a step low, and it's obviously it's more straight tone, a little bit less lush, but this is really a gorgeous version. This is kind of the modern classic, and it really brings out elements of the works that really make you appreciate it in a different way. It's really sort of a hypnotic effect because it's more a little bit, it's not, how to put it, overly done in terms of the emotions. It's more the kind of this pristine purity to it that really, really brings out the beauty of the works in a different way. So highly recommended. And then I want to go back in time to a few proverbial, classics of the pre-stereo age. One is from someone who was a teenager when he recorded this, Yehudi Menuhin. This is one of those, gramophone classics. This came from the mid-'30s. And Menuhin, as you might expect being a teenager, there's a freshness to it. He just had a wonderful instinctive artistry. The Chausson is really gorgeous. It's not as, the whole set, it's not as like maybe dramatic as you might get with Milstein, but there's something about seeing these works through a young person's eyes, especially someone like Menuhin, and he had such a a beautiful, beautiful tone. Even with the 30s recordings that you can hear, this is really a classic for a good reason. However, I also need to recommend another recording from Menuhin's teacher, Georges Enescu. Unfortunately, this did not come out until this was recorded in the I think early 40s. So he was actually a little bit more up in years, and he wasn't as technically proficient as he would have been if he had recorded a few decades a few decades earlier. But Enescu was just a brilliant artistic mind, very passionate musician. And if you love these works, this is something you're not going to want to miss either. The Chausson is just dripping with drama and pathos, and there's just all these wonderful musical insights. Even if at times you can tell that the technique cannot quite keep up with what the artistic mind is doing, probably a result of his being up in years. The recording quality is okay for the time, but again, it's a solo violin, so you're not having to worry too much about being able to hear what's going on. It's pretty clear. So a really, really great version of these works. Okay, so that's Bach. Now, again, moving through the alphabet, we're going to move forward now to the 20th century. And we're going to discuss Bartok. Bela Bartok, Hungarian composer, had his own unique language, borrowed a lot from Hungarian folk tunes, and his iconic string quartets, the set of 6. These, in many ways, are kind of Bartok's defining works. They're really one of a kind. There's a consistency to all 6 of them. They're really all wonderful, very inventive, very, very unique. And if you want to hear something more modern, more kind of challenging, this has always been something that people aspire to in terms of, it almost feels like conquering something because it's so different from anything else you've heard. There's all those kind of those colors that are mysterious, and then the rhythms, the dance rhythms as well. It's just really a potpourri of wonderful writing. My first choice for this is a vintage recording from 1961, if I can find it here. Here it is, the Hungarian Quartet. This is recorded really well. They sound sumptuous and warm. The interpretations are immaculate. Obviously, they knew this music very well. And they just strike the right tone. I'm really big on having a recording that sells you on the work. And this is one that when I put it on, I really feel like I'm being drawn into Bartok's sound world. And that's something really important, especially with a composer who is as unique as Bartok. So this is a really wonderful way to get to know the quartets. Now, the modern classic is another Hungarian quartet, the Takács Quartet. This was recorded in 1996. Excellent sound, fairly reverberant sounding. And these are very expressive, a little bit on the assertive side, very dramatic. They leave no stone unturned. There's nothing reticent at all about the playing. It is a modern classic for a reason. So this is a must-have as well. Another recording I want to recommend that's in digital is this one from the mid-'80s, the Berg Quartet, an Austrian quartet, one of the great quartets of all time, especially in our stereo era. They began in 1970s, so they had a chance to really record most all of the major standard repertoire. But they're called the Berg Quartet for a reason. They particularly wanted to focus on 20th century music, so this is definitely in their wheelhouse. Their style was, they were an immaculate group. Everything, I don't want to say perfection to make it sound like, it's just mechanical without feeling. Actually, they had beautiful tone. But they're sort of, for lack of a better way of putting it, kind of clinical approach where everything, you're just amazed at the proficiency of the playing, really lends itself to works like this. You hear all the lines with this wonderful clarity, And Bartok's music was not that, kind of lush, romantic, kind of schmaltzy type of composition. It was more something that was more kind of mentally challenging. And so Berg, excellent way to hear these quartets as well. Now, for a couple of older versions, I want to mention first another Hungarian quartet, the Berg Quartet. They did have a later recording, but this one came. This one is from 1954. It's a little bit rough sounding, but fairly clear. And these are really intense, very communicative interpretations, very, very thoughtful. The Berg Quartet was a quartet that was wonderfully artistic and introspective, and always went the extra mile in terms of interpretation. So this is really a must-have if you love these quartets. And then another version I have to mention is the Juilliard Quartet. This is their 1950 recording. Now, they did do excellent versions that many people consider the reference in stereo, and I'm not at all dissuading you from getting those. But I really like this mono one. There's an intensity to the playing here that is really wonderful. I mean, they have an obvious connection to the music. Again, I'm so big on, sell me on the music, and there's such intense passion here. This is maybe my, if I had to pick a desert island version, this one might be it, although all the ones I mentioned are wonderful. But this is really a must here as well. All right, so that's Bartok. Now, let's move on to Beethoven. First, the Beethoven string quartets. Another kind of Mount Everest, I would say. If you're talking about it, just like with the Beethoven symphonies, although there's also you have Mahler and Bruckner and so forth. But for string quartets, the 16 Beethoven string quartets, I once took a college class just on those works, so it's a big deal. And it's divided. They're divided into the early, the middle, and the late periods. The early being, I think, all pre-1800. They reflect more the Beethoven's classical style, more of the influence from Haydn. Then you have the middle period quartets. And then you have the late ones, which are really towards the end of his life, when he was kind of venturing into different territory. A lot of people consider those maybe the greatest things that Beethoven ever wrote. They're all wonderful. The very first quartet starts out with this very simple dee da da dee da dun, dee da da bum bum. And then all six of them, they have this classical grace, but also with that Beethoven individuality as well. And then the middle quartets start with numbers 7, 8, and 9. Those are Opus 59. Those are the Razumovsky quartets, dedicated to Count Razumovsky. Number 7 is very famous. It starts out with the da da dee da da dee da dee da 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 melody, and then it's got this long molto adagio that's really wonderful. And then the other two middle period quartets are number 10, the harp, because it's got this section with this little plucking pizzicati, and then one of my favorites, number 11, the Serioso. That one is just your typical Beethoven drama. It starts out dun, 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 dun. Again, excuse my approximatura. That's not exactly all the notes in there. I'm glad I don't have to sing it on stage or anything like that. And then this wonderful second movement that starts out beam bum 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 bum, and then depending on the quartet, you might hear a okay, so the breathing with string quartets is a thing. I feel like I should have a separate video just to cover the different quartets, how much they breathe, where they breathe, how audible it is. It's, because you don't have a conductor, so sometimes you have the lead violinist and they'll kind of do that inhaling thing. It's a thing that might bother some, but anyways, you might hear it in that spot in certain recordings. And And then we have the late quartets, which are just like I was saying about the Bartok string quartets, which also actually I think the same professor that I had that was teaching the Beethoven was teaching the Bartok string quartets as well in a separate class. The late quartets are really something. This is Beethoven really exploring, new and different territory, going beyond the four movements. Some highlights are number 13, has this beautiful central cavatina, the slow movement. And then that was followed originally by the Grosse Fugue, which is this crazy intense dramatic piece that I'm sure back in its day just sounded like a bunch of random noise. And it did. It caused quite a stir to the point where Beethoven removed it from the quartet, published it as its own opus number, and then wrote a alternate ending. It was actually, I think, the very last thing he ever wrote to attach to it. So often, though, you hear in recordings, they'll reinsert the Grosse Fugue where it was supposed to be after the cavatina, and then they'll continue on with that later movement. So otherwise, you might hear the Grosse Fugue just recorded as its own separate piece. And then you have number 14, which is my favorite Beethoven string quartet, and I would say probably overall the most popular one. It's just a really intense work. It starts out da dee da ding da dee da. So you got that dissonance there, and then there's a lot of drama, and then you have the middle movement, which is really beautiful, and then you have this short adagio. Kind of one of those Haydn-esque kind of introduction type things, except this is coming at the end, where you have something really slow that then goes right into something really more quick. And in this case, it's bum, ba-da-dum, 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 ba-dum, ba-dum. So it's really this wonderful ending. It's just a masterwork. All right, so enough about the works. Let's talk about the recordings. And just like with the Beethoven symphonies, you're not going to want just one. Beethoven is always, his music always opens itself to interpretation. And that's usually, there's the technical proficiency as well. But with Beethoven, there's the saying that the music was better than it can ever be played. That was essentially saying that there's all this room for interpretation, that really there's no limit of where you can go. My top recommendation comes from the late 70s, early 80s, and this is one where they really make the most of that interpretive leeway, and that's the Lindsay String Quartet, a British quartet. It's very well recorded, and the thing about the Lindsay Quartet is they just have this utter commitment to the spirit of the music, to what is being said. Someone once told me Beethoven was so good at making the music speak. It's not just notes and rhythms, it's happening randomly, that he's saying something. What exactly he's saying, if you could put it in words, it wouldn't be music, right? So you can't put it in words, but you can try to interpret it in some way. And Lindsay just really does that. Everything the serious parts, the dramatic parts, the long, beautiful adagios, like the number 7, the Razumovsky, just gorgeously done. That haunting opening to number 14 that I was just discussing, the dramatic Grosse Fugue. So for me, this is an excellent starting point for that very reason, that you have a quartet here that's really communicating the music. So that's my number one choice, but it's definitely not the only one I ever want to have, and definitely not the only one I'll recommend. I also recommend highly for interpretation the Vague Quartet. This is a very famous version from the early 70s, pretty well recorded. As I was just saying about the Vague Quartet with the Bartok quartets, they're a very introspective group, really beautiful tone. I would say compared to the Lindsay Quartet, the Vague is a little bit more, I know how else to put it, but more conventional in their tempos. Lindsay tends to be a little bit more extreme because they're really trying to scale those interpretive heights. So you get a little bit more conventional tempos and also a little bit more polished playing, I would say. But in no way is it mechanical. It's very deeply felt, very famous versions for good reason. Now, a sort of modern classic is one from this group that we also mentioned with the Bartok quartets, the Tchaikovsky Quartet. This is recorded in the early 2000s. This is really a wonderful version, especially if you like good sound. Just wonderful clarity, wonderful fullness, and the Tchaikovsky, very expressive, very dramatic. They also don't leave any stone unturned in terms of communicating the drama and the deep feeling in Beethoven's music. So you can't go wrong there either. Now, another version I want to recommend from right around the same time that the Lindsays recorded their version, the late 70s, early 80s, is the Talich Quartet. This is a Czech quartet that they also, like the Vague, they were known for their interpretations, very deeply felt. They really thought through the music. Especially the introspective parts, you don't want to miss hearing them in Beethoven. Wonderful gross fugue, very dramatic, fairly well recorded. It's one of those things where you're almost like, how many Beethoven string quartet versions can I have? And then you hear this and you're like, oh, I want that one too. So it's just an embarrassment of riches. And then have this one as well. This is one of the classic versions, the Italian quartet. Also known as the Quartetto Italiano. That's actually how it's written usually. This is the late 60s, early 70s, vintage Philips sound. No issues there. The Quartetto Italiano, they were just one of the immaculate string quartets in the 20th century. You can never go wrong with them. This wonderful singing tone, this wonderful intensity, everything is just played really beautifully and with a real commitment. So this is sort of one of the proverbial classics that you can't go wrong with as well. And then we have slightly newer. This is from the late 70s, early 80s, the Berg Quartet. I was just discussing them again with the Bartok quartets. They came along in the stereo era, and they're just immaculate. If you want sort of more, say contrast, say with the Lindsays, who kind of they go for broke on the dramatic side. The Berg Quartet, they're a little bit more grounded in terms of interpretation and in terms of their finesse and their polish and the beauty of their playing. It's just immaculate. If you want sort of the letting the music more speak for itself, which is saying something when it's Beethoven and when it's this repertoire. You really get that with the Berg Quartet. Beautifully played and excellent sound. And then I also want to mention one, believe it or not, remember Jack Palance, Ripley's Believe It or Not. We have one from this decade, yes, the 2020s. This is an American quartet, the Dover Quartet. This one is really a revelation. When I heard this one, I was like, wow, who are these guys? Excellent sound, wonderful fullness, wonderful clarity. And they also, they have this wonderful commitment, wonderful expression, wonderful polish to their playing. The slower movements in general tend to be a little bit on the quicker side, but it never sounds rushed. It's very musical, so that you don't even notice, oh, hey, that's a little faster than these other guys played. You don't even think about it. It's just so musical and intense. The gross fugue is all the dramatic things. Like I was talking about the opening of the Serioso, for example. It just really kind of floors you. So if you want a modern digital cycle, I mentioned the Tchaikovsky, that's a must. I would say the Dover as well is also excellent. All right, so I also, of course, have to mention some of the the older sets that give us just these wonderful insights, starting with the Budapest String Quartet. This is a very famous version. Now, they did do it in stereo, but this is their version from the early 50s on Sony, right around like 1951, 52. And so it's a little bit on the rough side, but still fairly clear. And again, with only so many instruments, you don't really notice it and you don't really think about it after a while. Just really wonderful insights, a wonderfully expressive, very intelligent group. They had been playing together for decades. One of the great string quartets of the 20th century. The thing about these groups is that the ones that play together and tour together and record together, it's like I was talking about at the beginning with chamber music. It's a group of friends meeting together in a small room. And the ones that have been doing it for a long time together, it's really priceless because they're able to do all these things and move together, and they know kind of what they're wanting to say. And so the Budapest Quartet is especially in this repertoire, it's something that you should hear if you want to be exposed to great chamber music making. Another group that I put in the same category is... where did they go? Here they are. The Hollywood String Quartet. Unfortunately, they only gave us the late string quartets. But, if you're going to choose, the late quartets are probably the ones that Beethoven is most known for, although, they're all wonderful. But this was recorded in 1957. It's a stereo recording. And the Hollywood String Quartet, they were made up of, as you might guess, string players who played in the Hollywood orchestras. But they were classically trained, and they really were consummate artists. And I'm going to be mentioning them throughout this video on chamber music, and I'm also going to be saying a lot, pleading with Warner, when are you going to put out a box set of the Hollywood String Quartet recordings? They made some of the greatest chamber music recordings ever, and they're really hard to find. It's hard to find them streaming anywhere. You have to look for these Testament releases that are, I'm pretty sure, out of print. They really deserve to be brought back to the public eye and re-released. They were just wonderful musicians, very committed, wonderful expression, kind of the old style expression, the early 20th century style, but also very polished and very insightful. So you don't want to miss them in the late Beethoven quartets. However, I cannot leave the Beethoven quartets without talking about, again, like I was saying about the Casals Bach cello suites, a set that for me is just one of the really great recorded classical music sets of all time, and that's the Busch Quartet from the 30s. Adolf Busch was the founder. He's the lead violin, and this quartet was just really known for their deep insights, the deep feeling they had for the music. They just had this authority about them of knowing exactly where they were going interpretively, and doing it really convincingly and in a way that's really moving and penetrating. I know that's kind of a hackneyed word, but it's really the only way I can think of to describe it. It's just really wonderful stuff. They did not record all of them. They did do all of the late quartets. They also did the Serioso, and on this set you have the 9th and the 1st. And then this was recorded in the 30s. That's when they were still in Europe. They actually fled during World War II to the States, and then they made some recordings in the 40s, including this one of the 7th and the 13th. Unfortunately, it doesn't include the Gross Fugue. I wish it did. But so you can kind of piece together the majority of the quartets. And the sound, of course, it's especially these 30s recordings, it's fairly limited and dim, but that's not why you're listening to these. It's the wonderful interpretations that are really priceless. So there you go for the Beethoven quartets. I'm going to take these and try to find a place for them where they won't all collapse and break. Okay, there you go. All right, so like I said, Mount Everest for string quartet writing. Now, as for Beethoven's other chamber works, I also want to mention the piano trios. He wrote, I believe it was 10 of them. It's either 9 or 10. The most famous one is number 7, the Archduke. As you might guess, it was written for an archduke. I don't remember his name, but it starts out with this wonderful theme in the piano. Din don dee don 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 da dee da din. And then it's just a wonderful piece, one of the iconic piano trios, and probably the most iconic piano trio ever composed. And then there's also number 5, the Ghost Trio, which it's called the Ghost because there's this kind of creepy sounding slow movement, especially towards the end. There's this run of the piano. You remember who were those guys on Saturday Night Live? Wayne's World, those two, like Wayne and Garth. They used to do the thing where they went back in time. Anyways, that's kind of what it sounds like. It sounds like a ghost kind of going and disappearing through a door. So that's why it's called the Ghost. Anyways, and they're all wonderful works. And my top choice for the set of 10 is this recording from the most famous piano trio, definitely of the recorded era, the Beaux-Arts Trio. They're headlined by the pianist Menachem Pressler. There's also the cellist Bernard Greenhouse and David Guyet, the violinist. Did I pronounce his name right? I think it's Guyet. This is from the mid-60s. And the Beaux-Arts Trio, I mean, they played and recorded like everything, and they just they had this immaculate artistry and attention to detail. I actually got to hear Menachem Pressler play the Archduke just a few blocks away at a community center, believe it or not. That was a real treat to be able to hear artistry like this, right next door. So these are really wonderful versions. They get that Beethoven eloquence and the drama, and there's just wonderful polish and very good sound quality, so you can't go wrong there. Now, another trio that is less well known, but should be more known, they were really around more in the 50s and 60s, is the Trio di Trieste, an Italian group, trio from Trieste, Italy. It's a little town kind of way up in the northeast corner of Italy. They're a wonderful group. I think you can only find them in this box set, this Georgia Gramophone box set. They have a variety of things recorded here, and among them are the the Ghost and the Archduke trios, both recorded in the 50s. I think one is in mono, one is in stereo. They're also excellent artists, real thinking artist, really a wonderful playing as well. The sound is pretty present and clear, so really not an issue with the sound quality. Just a little bit more dry than you would get with a modern recording, but really insightful, wonderful versions as well. However, I have to mention one more, and this is one of those old gramophone classics, like way old. This is from 1928. This is the trio of Alfred Cortot, Jacques Thibault, and Pablo Casals. This trio had been around for quite a while. They were formed in 1905, and these are three just really great musical minds. Again, it's the idea of chamber music, of these friends coming together and collaborating, and they had played together for so many years. They set down all these wonderful interpretations. I'm going to mention some others as well. This is probably their most famous one, the Archduke Trio. All three of them bring you wonderful insights in the way they play together as well. Like I was mentioning with the Bush Quartet and the Beethoven string quartets, they just have these interpretive insights that, despite the sound quality, you're going to want to hear. All right, so that's the piano trios. Let's now talk about some of Beethoven's sonatas, starting with the cello sonatas. He wrote 5 of them. And they can kind of roughly be divided into early. There's the 2 really early ones, so they're a little bit more classical sounding. And then there's the third, which is right in the middle of his middle period, which sounds kind of like the most stereotypically Beethoven, for lack of a better way of putting it. And then the 2 later ones, 4 and 5, that are a little bit more, you might say, introspective comparatively. They're all wonderful works. And one thing about them I would say is that, Beethoven was known for his piano works. He was a masterful piano. I would die to hear him playing. But the cello sonatas are a real partnership. It's not just the cello doing its thing and the piano accompanying, but it's a real partnership between the two of them. So you really need both a great cellist and a great pianist. So the version that I first recommend is this one from 1959 with Pierre Fournier on cello and Friedrich Gulda on piano. Gulda is a wonderful Beethoven player. We'll talk about him when we get onto the piano recordings. And then Pierre Fournier, of course, was one of the great cellists of the 20th century. He had a very polished style with a beautiful tone, just wonderful artistic a judgment that really works well for Beethoven, and then Gulda offers his insights as well. So you can't go wrong with this. And then I also want to recommend a historic version from the 30s, Pablo Casals. He recorded all 5 of the cello sonatas, most of them with Mieczysław Horszowski, and then also Otto Schulhoff. I think he was just on the 3rd sonata. Again, if it's cello, despite the primitive sound, you're going to want to hear Casals. He brought those interpretive insights, the drama, the passion, just the musical imagination and taste. It's just really wonderful. All right, so now let's talk about the violin sonatas. There were 10 of these. The most famous by far is maybe the most famous violin sonata ever written, the Kreutzer Sonata, number 9. It has this wonderfully dramatic opening, and it's real. It gets real agitated and just really kind of shakes you around if you want to think of it that way. And then it has this beautiful adagio, and then this really delightful final movement. And then you have the Spring Sonata, number 5, which is really sounds just like its moniker. It's just a very kind of delightful piece, puts you in a good mood. If you're wanting all 10, I recommend this set from the early 70s, in excellent stereo. Itzhak Perlman and his friend Vladimir Ashkenazy. Perlman has that wonderful sweet tone, excellent virtuosity. Ashkenazy matches him. The Kreutzer Sonata is just impeccable. This is really a great way to get to know these works for the first time. You can get the 2 most famous ones, the Spring and the Kreutzer, by themselves if you want. So I'll just put that out there as well. Now another set of the 10 that I want to recommend is this one. Wolfgang Schneiderhan with the pianist Carl Seaman. This is from 1959. Pretty good stereo sound. And Schneiderhan is a little bit rougher around the edge, maybe compared to Perlman, but it's really dramatic and intense. He really, just goes for it dramatically. So this is a set that you're going to want to hear as well. He had this great kind of fullness to his tone. It wasn't like this pristine sound, but it was excellent for romantic repertoire, really expressive. Like I said in my concerto video, he did an excellent version of the Beethoven concerto as well. So if you love these sonatas, I would definitely recommend this as well. And then I have to go back to this long ago vintage version from the 30s. Fritz Kreisler, the king of the violin, my absolute favorite violinist for the concerto. This is recorded with the pianist Franz Rupp. And Kreisler brings to these works his sort of aristocratic taste, the beauty and the way he phrased things. It's really, the proverbial playing from another age. It's really unmissable, the insights that he brings to all these works. But I want to recommend a couple of more versions from that same era. One is from Adolf Busch, the leader of the Busch Quartet. He's playing with his friend Rudolf Serkin. The 3rd and the 5th are recorded in the 30s. And then the Kreutzer is in a little bit better sound. It's in 1941 after he fled Europe for the U.S. The Kreutzer especially benefits from the power of Busch's playing. He was such a powerful, dramatic performer. That's another one where I recommend his violin concerto recording, the live one he did with his brother Fritz. Again, he just has that Beethoven power, and it's definitely one you want to hear. However, I have to mention my desert island choice, my favorite violinist of all time, Bronislaw Huberman. This is his famous 1930 recording with the great Polish pianist Ignaz Friedman. Here you really get, again, it's just the Kreutzer Sonata, but what you get is really a performance for the ages. These two are interpretive giants. They have just such a freedom about them. It's those musicians who the technical ability is there, but it's never front and center. You're not even thinking about it. It's always about the interpretation leading everything and the feeling for the music. And these two just go together throughout the work in a way that really is penetrating. It's pretty good sound for 1930, actually. I wouldn't say that you should hesitate for that reason. It's not too noisy or hissy. So you hear them fairly clearly. A really, really great recording. All right, so that is Beethoven. Now let's go back to the 20th century and let's talk about Alban Berg, a member of Schoenberg's 12-tone school, where you went away from traditional tonality. The 12 tones means, the chromatic, you have 12 tones on the piano, going the scale going up, and instead of centering on one to create a chord or a tonality, you go across all 12 tones so that your mind doesn't hear it as being in any particular key. It's really kind of like randomness codified. And we talked about his violin concerto. That's really maybe his most famous piece. He also wrote for string quartet a lyric suite, which is just what it says it is. It's very lyrical, but there's no tonality to it. So it sounds like the string quartet kind of like emoting in these different directions. But it's because there's no tonality, it almost feels like you're kind of mentally being jerked around, and it's a really unique experience. It's really a good introduction to atonal music. And my top recommendation is, no surprise, the Alban Berg Quartet. As I mentioned earlier, they call themselves that because they wanted to put a focus on 20th century music, and you can hear the dedication here. They really buy into it, and so they really do a good job of selling it to the rest of us. Of course, regardless of what they're playing, they are an immaculate ensemble, very clean. Everything is very clear and beautifully played. It's well recorded, so you can't go wrong with this one. I also want to recommend, if you are open to historic recordings, the one that Berg himself supervised, the Glimmer Quartet, a quartet from Vienna. Recorded this in 1936. It's okay sound. It is, it's a little bit noisy, but you want to hear it for the interpretation. And this is one of those, for me, it's a really unique experience when you hear a recording of something that's sort of hot off the press, and especially when it's supervised by the composer, you hear these insights and you hear this freshness, and you hear them telling, really, why was this composed? What is it that makes it so unique and compelling? And so they really dig into the music, and it's very palpable. So this is a version I would not want to be without either. It's incidentally coupled with the Louis Krasner version of the violin concerto, which I also highly recommend for that piece as well, for the very same reasons. Okay, so that's Berg. Now let's go to a composer that a lot of people will not have heard of, Heinrich Biber. 17th century composer, kind of like Paganini. He was known in his day as the virtuoso violinist of his time. And so he composed these works, kind of like Paganini did. He composed works that to kind of show off his own playing. And these are the mystery sonatas, or sometimes known as the Rosary sonatas. They're based on the Rosary, which is meditations on the life and death of Christ, divided into 3 different sections of 5 movements each, and with continuo and a light accompaniment. And then finally, at the end, there's a little, kind of maybe about a 4-minute solo violin movement just by itself. It's a passacaglia. So there's just like this one theme, and then the rest of the movement keeps repeating that theme and building on it. They really are really wonderful works. It's kind of a mystical experience, kind of like one of those things when you have it on. And we're lucky to have this recording from 1989 with John Holloway on violin, David Moroni on keyboard, and the Ensemble Tragicomedia. Wonderful sound, beautiful playing. It like I was saying, it really casts a spell. Wonderful clarity, beauty to the sound. So it's what if you want to have like kind of a meditative afternoon, I would say put this on. You can't go wrong. Okay, so that's Biber. Now we have a Russian composer, late Romantic, a member of the Russian Five, those 5 composers who wanted to bring more Russian themes to the forefront of classical music, Alexander Borodin. And probably his most famous work, the String Quartet No. 2. It's a very lovely, very melodic piece, especially known for its third movement, the slow movement Notturna. Really beautiful. One of the most famous themes in all of classical music. And my top choice is the eponymous Borodin String Quartet. This is their recording from 1962. Really good stereo sound. And here you just get you get the beautifulness and the lushness, but it's not overdone, so it never sounds like schmaltzy. They were one of the great 20th century string quartets, and in this coupling you also get their version from the same year of the Shostakovich Eighth. So this is an excellent CD overall. All right, so that's Borodin. Now we come to the chamber music of Brahms. Now, in my previous videos, I've talked about like oeuvres or pantheons of works. Like, for example, when you talk about the symphonies and you get to Beethoven or you get to Mahler, you get to these giants. We talk about string quartets. We were just talking about the Beethoven. I think for chamber music in general, Brahms is just its own big thing. It really is, you could spend a whole month just listening to Brahms chamber works. It's not even the volume. There's a couple of dozen of them. There's about 24. But it's the consistency of them. They're just so good. It's some of the best stuff Brahms did. It's very melodic. It's got his wonderful rich harmonies. It's also got a lot of those dance rhythms, like you get in the Hungarian dances, for example, and a lot of his music, you get those syncopated rhythms. You have that throughout these works. They're just really wonderful and a really great way to appreciate chamber music in general. So I'm going to start first with what might be his most popular chamber work overall, and that's the Clarinet Quintet. This is a work that he wrote fairly late in life. Like Mozart, it was inspired because he heard a clarinetist. This clarinetist's name was Richard Mühlfeld, and he just loved the sound. I think Brahms had even at that point just given up on he wasn't really wanting to compose anymore at all. And then he heard this clarinetist, and he retired to Bad Ischl outside of Salzburg and sat down to writing both a clarinet trio and this lovely clarinet quintet. And you can tell what it was that attracted him to that sound, that kind of mellow, relaxed sound. And the clarinet quintet opens with this beautiful melody in the strings. Din da 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 din di da 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 di dan di dan di dan di dan. Then the clarinet comes in. Do 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 di da 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 da. Again, one of those beautiful Brahms melodies. And then the second movement is this really autumnal, just this gorgeous kind of, there's this stillness in character to it. It's just, there's sort of a calming effect to the sound of the clarinet, I guess is what I'm trying to get to. And it's a really popular work for good reason. My top choice for the clarinet quintet is this version from 1964 with Gervais de Paye, English clarinetist, and the Milos Ensemble of London. It's pretty good sounding. It's very present and full. And mainly the reason I recommend this version is just the artistry of the group. They have that Brahmsian warmth, and the way they move together, it really works well. It's gorgeous playing, and really a great way to get to know the work. Now, for something a little bit newer in digital sound, I recommend this one from German clarinetist Karl Leister. This is with the Brandes Quartet. This was recorded in the mid-90s. Leister had a little bit more of a mellow tone, so it even has more of that sort of meditative quality. And the Brandes Quartet, they really play well as well in terms of the warmth and moving together and the gorgeousness of that slow movement. So this is also a great way to get to know the work. I would recommend another Leister version from right around the same time with the Leipzig Quartet if you want something with just a little bit more zip to it. They're both excellent. Of course, the quintet, it's more autumnal, but it has its quick sections as well. And some people feel that slow movements can drag, and they like a little bit more movement with it. So you might prefer this version. They're both recommendable. Another excellent version in digital sound is one from 1986 with another English clarinetist, Thea King. This is with the Gabrieli Quartet. And this is just a gorgeous recording. Beautifully played, beautiful sounding. It's that Hyperion sound. They always did a great job with the clarity and fullness. And King plays with just wonderful artistry, wonderful taste. It's just really beautiful. In the Gabrieli Quartet, they're very expressive. So another excellent way to know the quintet. Incidentally, we'll come to it, but if you want both of those clarinet works together, this does come with a clarinet trio as well. Those two works that he wrote together. And then finally, I want to recommend this vintage version, another British clarinetist, this one from 1937. Reginald Kell is the clarinetist, and he's playing with the Bush Quartet. Goes without saying with the Bush Quartet, they did wonderful Brahms recordings. They have wonderful interpretive insights, beautifully expressive. It's a little bit actually on the faster side, for example, in that first movement. Really moves with a lot of dexterity. And that beautiful warmth in the slower sections. This is a very famous interpretation of this work, despite the slightly dimmer sound, or a real classic, one that I particularly love. All right, so if that's the Clarinet Quintet. If that's not his most popular chamber work, then maybe the Piano Quintet is. They're both kind of up there. The Piano Quintet, if anything, it's a little bit more epic, a little bit more dramatic. It really shows that side of Brahms. And there's a lot of pathos and in this work that you can find. And my top choice for this one, it's a slightly more vintage choice than I normally recommend as a first choice, but it's so good that I just can't help recommending it. The Hollywood Quartet version with Victor Aller. He's incidentally the brother of the cellist Eleanor Aller. I think she's the cellist. Is she the cellist or the second violinist? Let's see, where is she? Yeah, she is the cellist. Incidentally, Hollywood Quartet, headed by Felix Slotkin, who is or was the husband of Eleanor Aller. So Victor is Felix's brother-in-law. And some of you probably know Leonard Slotkin, famous conductor of the later half of the 20th century. He's the son of Felix and Eleanor. So all in the family. I've said before about Hollywood Quartet, Warner, when are you going to put out a Hollywood String Quartet box? It's long overdue. They made so many fabulous recordings. And I would put at the top of the heap this set of the piano. It's got the piano quintets as well as the piano quartets and the Schumann piano quintet. They just really dig into this music, and they've got this kind of a vintage romantic vibe about them, for lack of a better way of putting it. It's never just everything for technical sake. They obviously love the music. They play with wonderful expressivity, wonderful drama, wonderful sensitivity. The sound it's from 1954, so it is mono. It's a little bit scratchy sounding in the violins. But it's such a great interpretation that I really have it as my top one if you're wanting to love the piano quintet. But there are several excellent versions. If you want a little bit better sound in stereo, we have this one from 1963 with Rudolf Serkin and the Budapest Quartet. You can't go wrong with this group. This is a very assertive, dramatic version. Just wonderfully played, wonderfully recorded. Definitely could also be a reference version. And then for something a little newer, not quite digital, but getting close to digital 1979, is the Quartetto Italiano with fellow Italian Maurizio Pollini. This is a really dramatic, assertive version, beautifully played, wonderfully recorded, really brings home the drama of the work, so you can't go wrong with this. Now for something a little bit more, I would say it has the drama, but it also has that sort of aristocratic beauty as well, is this one from 1966. Arthur Rubinstein, that gentleman of the piano, with the American Guarneri Quartet. Fairly well recorded. There's more of that sense of nobility to this version. It's really beautiful. It shows you another side of the piano quintet. Very famous version for good reason. And then finally, I want to recommend, just like with the clarinet quintet, we have a Bush quartet version from the 30s. This time, again, with Rudolf Serkin. This is 1938. Serkin a little bit more youthful here. I mean, he's wonderful in the Budapest version as well. But it's mainly the insights of the Bush Quartet that you get that really go for Baroque, emotional, drama that they bring. That despite the limited sound, although it's pretty clear, is an excellent version as well. Okay, so that's the piano quintet. Now, Brahms cut his teeth on the piano, so there's going to be more than just one piano work for chamber. And sure enough, we have a set of 3 piano quartets. I love these works. They're fairly long. I mean, all 3 of them, they're about the length of, just about the same length as his concertos and symphonies. The first one has this wonderful final movement. I talked about how the rhythmicness of Brahms is something you really hear a lot in his chamber music. That one starts out with this dun 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 dun, and then when you get to the very end, the coda in the final movement, all of a sudden he returns to that theme, but it's much faster and it's just exhilarating. It's really one of the more thrilling moments in all of chamber music. And then the second piano quartet, it's also a long, long work, but it's full of wonderful melodies and it's very rhythmic and dance-like. And then the third quartet, it's very dramatic. The second movement is wonderful. It goes dee-dong, and there's da-da-da, da-da-da. I can't imitate it exactly, but it's very rhythmic and exhilarating. So for these, again, like I was saying, the piano quintet, I have to recommend this set, the Hollywood Quartet. These are slightly better recorded. They're actually in stereo, 1956. And they just give you this interpretation that just sounds more like, from the horse's mouth. They just know the music so well, and they're just able to take off and go in an interpretive direction that really brings home all those wonderful qualities of the music. So this is my top choice. However, I do want to mention a newer recording from 2005 with Marc-Andre Hamelin on piano and the Leopold Trio, beautifully recorded and wonderfully played too. It's a little bit more suave. You really hear the beauty of the music. For example, there's this gorgeous kind of lilting slow movement, the second piano quartet, that just sounds gorgeous here. It's one of those lullaby-like rocking type things that Brahms would write. And so the beauty of the playing and the beauty of the sound, if you love the quartets, you're not going to want to miss this. Not to mention Hamelin adds in what for me is one of my favorite piano sets of all time, the Brahms's Opus 117, which are gorgeous. So he adds those as well. All right, so that's the quartets. But we also have 3 piano trios. And we talked about the clarinet quintet, and the piano quintet is maybe his most popular chamber works overall. I would add in there the first piano trio. In fact, I would say as a gateway to Brahms's chamber music, this may be the first one I would start with, just because he has those beautiful melodies. Right at the beginning, it starts with bum 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 be don don din da da ba da 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 ni da. Again, I'm kind of approximating how it goes, but it's just really beautiful. And then it's also got this wonderful lush melody in the middle of the second movement as well. All 4 movements are just wonderful. And then you've got the second piano trio and the third, which have a lot of wonderful rhythmicness to them, if that's an adjective. It's just really wonderful stuff. And we have a recording of this one that fortunately comes in very good sound, 1968 Decca sound. That really is one of the classic Brahms chamber work recordings. This is with the pianist Julius Katchen, a wonderful Brahms pianist. He recorded actually all of the Brahms piano works. And then Joseph Suk, the grandson of the composer, and Janos Starker on cello. And this is just wonderfully lush, wonderfully beautiful, just romantic in the best way. They exercise just excellent musical judgment. I can't think of a better way to get to know these works. However, they are beautiful works, so you may not want to restrict yourself just to one recording. We have this one from 1972, spread onto 2 different CDs, but it's with Arthur Rubinstein, Henrik Schering on violin, and Pierre Fournier on cello. So 3 heavy hitters, if there ever was that for a chamber music set of recordings. And they bring all of their insight. Of course, I've talked before about the nobility of Rubinstein. They really do a great job of underlining everything here. All those romantic, beautiful, lush melodies, exercising wonderful taste. And then for a 1972 recording, it's very good and full and clear as well. So that's recommendable. And then finally, I want to recommend one more for that first piano trio, more of a vintagey version from 1952. This one is with the pianist Myra Hess, Isaac Stern on violin, and Pablo Casals on cello. This is recorded at Casals Protest Festival, which was a festival that took place in the French Pyrenees and produced wonderful concerts. Probably, I'm sure most of them were not recorded, but we were lucky to have some of them. This one, I don't know if it's a live recording or if it was like something they recorded like on site or something, because I don't hear much audience noise. It's a pretty clear recording, even though it's a little bit more limited compared to a full studio. But what you get here is again, chamber music. A group of friends getting together and just enjoying the music. And this version of the Piano Trio number 1, it's very probing, it's very insightful, and if you love the work, it's also one that you're going to want to hear. Okay, so now let's move on to, there's so many more to go for Brahms. The next set I'm going to talk about is his 2 string sextets. These works, as you might imagine, they almost sound like string orchestras. It's a little different than it really makes it different when you add those extra 2 string players. And these are gorgeous works. The first one is really beautiful. It's got this wonderful second movement, especially. And then the second one is one of my favorite Brahms chamber works overall. It starts out with the strings are kind of moving, na 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 na, and it goes dan din dan. It's kind of lifts you into this different place, and then the second movement, the strings are kind of like real high, like it sounds really evocative, and it reminds me almost like something you'd hear from Tchaikovsky or Sibelius. It's really wonderful stuff, and we're lucky to have this recording, very famous, from 1988, in very good sound, again on Hyperion, with the Raphael Ensemble. Just beautifully played, beautifully recorded. Everything is just beautifully judged. It really helps you appreciate these works. So this is kind of the proverbial digital classic. Really one of the most highly recommended Brahms chamber recordings that you can find. And then let's take off one string player and now move on to the string quintets. Also 2. And these are just, the proverbial Brahms, the warmth, the inventiveness. It's Brahms, he's just had all these wonderful ideas. it's just the chamber music is just like this endless potpourri of goodies. And this is one, again, that we have a really nice digital recording that I can recommend. This one is from the mid-90s. The Haydn Quartet, supplemented by violist Gerard Chausson. Really lush, beautiful, tastefully done, everything very well phrased, and beautifully recorded. It really helps you appreciate these works. Just wonderful listening to just, pop in for a nice afternoon. All right, so now let's talk about the string quartets. Okay, now he wrote 3 string quartets, and this is the irony about Brahms. I talked about how his chamber music as a whole, I think of, for me, is just in all of classical music, chamber music is sort of like the thing to maybe look at, like you could spend a whole month with. But the irony is that the combination that is your most stereotypical chamber music combination, the string quartet, that's the one where I think Brahms maybe struggled a little bit more. It's maybe the black sheep of his chamber music output. And the sort of proverbial, explanation is that he may have been trying too hard, just like he did with the symphonies, feeling the shadow of Beethoven. In fact, the first string quartet starts, it's in the key of C minor, just like his first symphony was in the key of C minor, which is a key that you often associate with Beethoven. The thing about the string quartets of Brahms, they're compared to a lot of his other output, which, like I was just talking about the string quintets, it makes for, it's very pleasant listening. It's kind of easy to just kind of readily absorb. The string quartets are a little bit more dense. There's a lot of drama. It's a lot of busyness, and that's why you almost get the feeling that he was maybe felt people peering over his shoulder from the past. I would say that the third string quartet, it almost feels like maybe he relaxed a little bit. Maybe he went back to Haydn for some inspiration here, because there's a little bit more of a lightness to it. Where he's just letting the music kind of run and do its thing rhythmically. But the thing is, the string quartets, they might be harder to get into, but I think they are rewarding works once you get over that hump. It's still Brahms. Maybe it's just something you have to be in the right mood for, but it's still wonderful writing. And my top recommendation for these works is a fairly recent recording from the mid-2000s, the Emerson Quartet. And I think the Emerson Quartet does an excellent job of selling these works, if you will. For one thing, they're just really wonderful to listen to. They're immaculately virtuosic, very polished, beautiful tones, beautifully recorded. They kind of put maybe kind of a shiny light on these works that maybe is something that they need. I really come away just really enjoying the quartets when I hear it in a recording like this. Now, I also want to mention a recording that is coupled with one of my piano quintet recommendations, and that's this one, the Budapest Quartet from 1963. Of course, the Budapest, one of the all-time great interpreters of the German Romantics. So you would want to hear them in Brahms, and they bring that here. They bring the drama, the emotion, the interpretive insights. So this is also a great way to appreciate these works. However, I have to mention one of my olden day favorites from a quartet most people probably would not have heard of. This is the Léner Quartet, a Hungarian quartet, and this was recorded in the late 20s, early 30s. And this is just one of those like really old recordings that sounds kind of like more from the horse's mouth. You can hear the identification with the music. They do things instinctively that you won't necessarily hear nowadays. Of course, it's very old sound, so you have to get past that. It's a little bit noisy, but especially for works like the string quartets, which can be a little bit hard to get into, it's really something to hear a recording like this where you can hear the identification with the music in a really kind of a stereotypical late romantic style. I really think it helps them, and I really enjoy these. All right, so that's the string quartets. Now, one of my absolute favorite Brahms chamber works, the horn trio. Wonderful! What a wonderful work this is. All four movements just really, really strong. It's a combination of horn, violin, and piano. One of my favorites is the third movement. It starts with the piano kind of rolling up. Boom, 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 boom. It's really cool. And it's really kind of almost this eerie sounding movement. I mean, Brahms was just so inventive. And then the final movement is just real fun. It's like anyways, I can't imitate it exactly, but you get the picture. My top choice for this is one of the great horn players, especially of the recording era, Barry Tuckwell. However, this is a recording that you may not have heard of before. This one is from 1987. It's with Brenton Langbine on violin and Maureen Jones on piano. And here's the thing. Tuckwell was, of course, Australian, and these two were also Australian. And before Tuckwell was famous, he used to tour around in a trio. So they toured and played together for decades before they put this recording down. And I think that's part of what makes this recording such a success. It really works well. They bring out all the great aspects of the works wonderfully. They probably had played it together numerous times before this. And it's got excellent digital sound as well. So this is one of those kind of under the radar versions, even though it's got a famous name attached to it, that I think you really would really should look at if you want to learn the horn trio for the first time. Now, he did make a much more famous recording with a couple players who weren't slouches in their own right. He recorded it with Yitzhak Perlman and Vladimir Ashkenazy in 1968. Vintage Decca sound, all three of them in top form. You can't go wrong with this as well. Ashkenazy plays wonderfully dramatically, and Perlman brings that sweetness of tone and that wonderful musical judgment. So this one is a justly famous version. Now, another version I want to mention, and this one, I think it's the first time we've mentioned the Marlborough Festival. That was a festival in Vermont that brought together, again, these musical friends to make chamber music. This one is with Myron Bloom on horn, and then Michael Tree is the violinist. Incidentally, his name, Michael Tree, he was originally Michael Applebaum. But when he came to the States, his teacher, Ephraim Zimbalist, a great violinist, for marketing, he said, why don't you change it to something a little bit, maybe I would imagine, maybe it's like that Blazing Saddles thing where, too German, perhaps, I don't know. But anyways, he changed it from Applebaum to Tree. So that became his stage name. And then on piano, Rudolf Serkin, who was very active in the Marlborough Festival as well. And so it's a little bit rough sounding. This might have been a live concert because I recall that there's some extraneous noises, I think, as you're listening, but it's not too bad. But it's a really wonderful interpretation, wonderful warmth, obvious love for the music. So this is an excellent version. And then I also have to mention this sort of classic of the 30s. Once again, we go back to the Busch players. Adolf Busch, violin, Rudolf Serkin on piano, and Aubrey Brain on horn. If you recognize the Brain name, he was the father of the famous British horn player Dennis Brain. This is a wonderful version as well, very insightful. That slow movement is very lush and beautifully done, and they have loads of fun in that finale as well. Really exciting, and just such a great piece. I can't do with just one recording. So, all right. So there is the horn trio. Now, we mentioned before, when we were talking about the clarinet quintet, that he was inspired by Richard Mühlfeld to write a quintet. He also wrote at the same time a clarinet trio. And then later, he also wrote a couple of clarinet sonatas. So Brahms was really taking advantage of the clarinet's sonority and giving us masterpieces for that instrument. The trio is like the quintet. It's a little bit on the autumnal side. I would even say there's a little bit more variety to the trio. And then also the sonatas as well. There's a lot of skill that's required to really play these sonatas well. We have a recording, fairly recent, that combines all three of these works, the trio and the two sonatas. And that's from a group of Swedish players. Martin Frist on clarinet. Cello is Torleif the Dane. And Roland Pentinen is the pianist. I hope I'm pronouncing those correctly. Beautifully played. Frist has a gorgeous mellow tone that's very seductive, and you can just listen to it for hours, and beautifully recorded as well. So this is really a fairly ideal way to get all three of these together. I do want to mention the recording I mentioned earlier for the quintet. That's also coupled with the trio from Thea King. This is with Karina Georgian is the cellist, and the pianist is Clifford Benson. Beautifully judged, beautifully recorded on this Hyperion release. Thea King had this beautiful tone and wonderful artistry as well. So this is also a great way to hear the trio. And then finally, for the sonatas, I also want to mention one more recording from Gervais de Pied, who I recommended for the clarinet quintet. This time he's accompanied on piano by Daniel Barenboim. So that's a really wonderful combination, and they both just exude wonderful artistry and judgment, just bringing out the dramatic parts and also those beautiful moments of stillness. The first sonata, the slow movement, is just so it's like dee da dee da 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 dee da. It's one of those things that almost it kind of makes you feel whole kind of things. It's just really gorgeous. So anyways, wonderful recording as well. All right, so now let's stick with, we just have a few more sonatas now, both sets of two from Brahms, starting with the cello sonatas. And these are just really fantastic, gorgeous works. Again, I'm going to do the human cello thing and imitate the cello. At the beginning of the first one, it goes, bin don da di don di da da di da di da 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 di. I'm starting to lose my voice, by the way, talking so much. But anyways, it's this beautiful mellow opening. And then it has like these variations in the final movement. The piano, again, as always with Brahms works, the piano is always very active. And then the second cello sonata might be slightly more popular than the first one, although they're both wonderful works. It's a little bit more energetic and a lot of my rhythmic energy as well. Now, for this one, my top choice is the husband-wife duo from the late 60s. Again, Daniel Barenboim on piano, and this time Jacqueline Dupre on cello. Oh, this is just a beautiful recording. I love it. Dupre was such a unique artist, and the thing about her is she was so involved emotionally in what she was doing. You get the feeling with her that like nothing else matters or could matter in the world. It's just her and that cello. And then Barenboim matches her. And so for these works, these quintessential romantic works, I really think this is an excellent way to get to know them and to appreciate them. Now, another version I want to recommend from, obviously one of the great cellists is Pierre Fournier. And this is with Wilhelm Bachhaus, one of the great Brahmsian pianists. This is a little older. It's from the mid-50s. The sound is pretty good, though. Pretty good Decca sound. And Fournier just brings that poise that he has, that taste, a little bit more, I don't know if austere is the word, but he's a little bit more discipline, you might say, in the way he phrases, but it's also flexible and beautiful and just a wonderful way to hear these works as well. Now, another great cellist who put in his 2 cents a little bit later in life is Mstislav Rostropovich with Rudolf Serkin, and this is in digital sound. This is from 1983. I mean, look at Serkin. This is a 1983 recording. We just talked about his 1933 horn trio. So we've got Brahms chamber recordings spanning half a century with the same artist. That's really something. This version is more on the mellow side comparatively, I would say. It's not as assertively dramatic, but you get kind of a different side of it here, and you get that beautiful tone from Rostropovich, that wonderful artistry, the chemistry between him and Serkin in this recording is really wonderful. So again, it's a little bit different way to hear the works, and one that I think is really rewarding. And then finally, I have to mention this recording of just the second sonata with Pablo Casals. This is 1936, Mieczysław Horszowski. Like I said, the second is a little bit more animated and energetic, and Casals really brings it. He just really digs into the music. Of course, it's a little bit limited sound, but you want to hear these artists do their thing. So that is the cello sonata or cello sonatas. And then finally, I want to mention the violin sonatas. And actually, I said there's 2 of them. Actually, there's 3 of them, I should say. And these are just wonderfully lyrical works. You get that Brahms, gift for melody. The first sonata opens up with this theme that goes dun da dun da di da dun. Dun da da dun, dun da da dun. It's just really immediately pulls you in, and then there's also there's Brahms's rhythmicness and so on. So it's just really wonderful violin works. My top choice for this one is a duo that comes from the trio we just talked about. Joseph Suk, violin, and Julius Katchen on piano. Very well recorded, 1967, and they just bring that wonderful romantic spirit to the music, the lushness and beauty of tone and wonderful phrasing. It's really an ideal way to hear these works for the first time. However, I also want to recommend this one, a little bit newer, from 1990. One of these beautiful sounding Harperian releases. This is with Krysia Sostovich on violin and Susan Tomes on piano. They incidentally belong to the group Domus, which has some other recordings that we're going to talk about later. This one there's this pristine beauty to it. It really helps you appreciate the beauty of the writing. Of course, it's got wonderful sound as well. It may be slightly more, a little bit more on the demure side compared to the Suk Katchen, but also very dramatic as well. So this is also one that I just wouldn't want to be without. It's just really gorgeous. Now, I want to mention a few vintagey versions. Really, really older ones, but rewarding. This is coupled with that horn trio that I mentioned earlier with Adolf Busch and Rudolf Serkin. This is from the early 30s, and they bring their wonderful insights into the romantic repertoire. You really can't go wrong anytime you come across these Busch and Friends recordings. Busch just has that wonderful lushness to his tone and his imagination, so that's a great one. However, let me also mention that's just the first two sonatas, not the third one. However, for those first two sonatas, I also have to mention this one. This is my sort of desert island version, even though it's so old. This is with Tosca Seidel. And he's accompanied by Arthur Lesser on piano. These are from the late 20s, early 30s. And this is another one of those, it sounds like from the horse's mouth. His teacher, incidentally, was Leopold Auer, who was like a bigwig in the late 19th century. So he really, he's a creature of that time, and you can hear it. There's just this natural way that he phrases things that you just don't hear today. It's almost on the, you almost want to say, the schmaltzy side. Maybe that's why our modern era we've kind of gotten away from this, but it just sounds so natural and perfect for the repertoire. I just love it. Incidentally, there is a song that George Gershwin wrote. It goes Tosha, Misa, Yasha, Sasha. It's all four of them Russian Jewish violinists. Tosha Seidel, Misha Elman, of course Yasha Heifetz, and then probably lesser known Sasha Jacobson. And it's just like, you can probably find it on YouTube. It's like what is it? Misha. I can't remember the words. Like Misha, Yasha, Sasha, Tosha. Anyways, it's they're having fun, so that's cool. Anyway, so highly recommend this version if you love these works. And then, so these are for the first two sonatas. We also have an older recording of the third sonata I want to recommend, with Joseph Szigeti and wonderful Brahms pianist Egon Petri as well. Same qualities that I was just talking about, just that natural romantic feel for the music. The third sonata it's a little bit more virtuosic, I would say, than the first two. So Szigeti really plays the heck out of it. It's one that if you love the work, you're going to want to hear. And it's coupled here with his classic recording from 1928 of the violin concerto as well. All right, so that is Brahms. Did you see how long that took? Brahms is chamber music. It's just it's a thing. It really is just a wonderful world of its own. Okay, so I'm going to try now to collect myself and move on now to the rest of the repertoire, starting with Chausson, 19th century French composer, who wrote this interesting work. It's called Concert for Violin, Piano, and String Quartet. And I talked about when discussing his symphony in B flat that work it's kind of melodramatic, which is I'm not saying that like it's a bad thing. That's the only way I can think to describe it. It's kind of like if you were to watch a 40s movie, and someone just find out that her husband ran off with his secretary or something, and there's this music that's depicting the drama of the situation. You get a lot of that with Chausson. So you get things that kind of overtly dramatic, but also really, really beautiful, really colorful in the best French manner. And my top choice for this one for recordings is this 1983 version with Itzhak Perlman on violin, Georges Boulez on piano, and the Juilliard String Quartet. Perlman brings that beautiful sweetness, but Boulez was a wonderful pianist, especially for the French repertoire, and the Juilliard String Quartet play immaculately. So it's just this really, really interesting piece, and one that if you like sort of the 19th century color and romance, and yes, maybe you might call it melodrama, it's really a great work to check out. Now, for something closer in time to Chausson, to give us a bit more of that drama, I also want to recommend this one with Alfred Cortot on piano and his buddy Jacques Thibault on violin. Remember, they were part of the trio that played together for many decades. And some quartet, I think they just called it the International Quartet, but I don't think it was actually a name quartet. Very primitive sound. It's from 1931. Definitely not one to get to hear the color of the work, but it is one to get if you want to hear that really romantic, dramatic flavor that I was talking about. Cortot was a very, very imaginative artist, just one of my favorite pianists of all time. So if you love the work, I would say you might also want to check this out. All right, so now we come to two string quartets, which are giants, some of the greatest works ever composed. For me, these are sort of, I consider these the gateway to all of chamber music, really, because they're just so appealing. I don't know anybody who doesn't love these works. The Debussy and Ravel string quartets, they kind of just go together. I'm basically only going to be recommending versions that pair them together. The Ravel was written a little bit after the Debussy. Structurally, they're very similar. They both have these kind of quick pizzicati movements. Some have said that the Ravel is more of a conservative work. I guess. Debussy had his own kind of language in the way he spoke. But the Ravel, I guess you call it conservative, but it's a very inventive work too. Very beautiful. Very rhythmic and dramatic, and then the Debussy is just gorgeous. It starts out dun 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 dun. I'm screwing up the rhythms, I understand. I'm just trying to give you an idea of how they go. And then the Ravel starts out very more lyrically. I'm losing my voice, so I may need to stop singing at this point. But anyways, these works are just iconic, great. If you're relatively new to classical music and you're kind of dipping your toe into chamber music, I highly recommend these. My top choice is one that comes in very good sound, 1979. The Milos Quartet. This is a German quartet. I think they're either German or Austrian. I can't remember. One of the two. Anyways, they really have played these in impeccable interpretations. To move very well. It's got plenty of lushness without being overly romantic. And the movement is so important because these pieces, they're not more of like, they're not your kind of more strict classical sounding works. So it's really important to have a really good idea of where to inflect things and so on, and these just sound so perfectly natural. It's just a really great way to first get to know them and a recording to live with as well. However, these works are so great, you're going to want to hear them in different interpretations. And one that I highly recommend is this one, the Alban Berg Quartet from 1984. This is a little bit more of a kind of a drier approach, very dramatic, very assertive. And again, the album Berg, they're more of a 20th century quartet, so they're not into the kind of the romantic lushness as much. So you get a little bit more of that drier, just the facts quality that it lets you hear the music in a way that is really effective, especially those rhythmic sections. Now, I also have to recommend this one, fairly recent recording, the Quatuor Eben from 2008. Beautiful sounding recording, nice fullness, nice detail, and this is a version it's very suave. Like I was talking about before, it's really important to know how to move with these quartets, the ebbs and the flow, and they just do a beautiful job. It's a little bit difficult to take repertoire like this that is so well known and has been done so much, and to add something new. And sometimes when you hear a recording, you almost want to say the musicians could be trying too hard, like they're trying too hard to make something out of this or out of that. Here, they definitely are different. They're definitely individuals, what I'm trying to say. They're definitely making a point of not just doing a run-of-the-mill version. But it's very convincing and very really seductive, I would say. So this is a kind of a modern classic and justly famous. Now, for an older classic, maybe the older classic, the old classic, we have again the Italian quartet, or Quartetto Italiano, from the mid-60s. Of course, they're going to have impeccable playing, beautiful sound. They also move real well. It's maybe a little bit more. It's a little bit more held back slightly in terms of tempo. They don't do anything too dramatic in terms of pushing things forward. But it's the main thing here is the way the beauty of the works comes across, and that's probably why this became such a standard for this repertoire. It's just one that you're not going to want to be without if you love these works. Another one that is from that same era, it's from 1973, that I want to recommend is the Guarneri Quartet. We haven't mentioned them too much. They're an American quartet, and this is maybe a little bit under the radar, or maybe it's kind of been forgotten these days, but it's a really lovely version. The Guarneri Quartet had beautiful tone, and this richness and this kind of nice vibrato that wasn't too heavy, but just very pleasing. And so again, if you love these works, you're going to want to hear them done in a way that's just very, very pleasing, very beautiful, and that's what you get here. It's just a really good, solid version of these works, which you're going to want to hear if you love them. And then finally, I have to mention this one from the 30s, the Calvé Quartet. Now, here is something where, again, it's more closer in time to when they were written, so you get a feeling for the newness of the works. These guys really, the way they move, it's just really something. There's a feel that they have for the music, which I have not heard in any other recording, good as they all are. This is the one that, for interpretive reasons, I think I return to more than any other. It's just really captivating, and just beautifully judged. And even though it's primitive sound, limited sound, if you love the works, I would definitely check this one out for the interpretation. One of my favorite string quartet recordings. All right, so that's Debussy. Now let's talk about the chamber music of the great Czech composer Antonín Dvorak, starting with one of his most popular works, the 12th String Quartet, the American. Nicknamed because he wrote it in a little town in Iowa. He was taking a little break from the hustle and bustle of late 19th century New York City, and he drew inspiration for this quartet. And I don't know if there are specific American themes in this quartet, but to me, when I hear it, it has that kind of frontier feel to it. It sounds very free. It's got this kind of lilting, slow movement with this beautiful theme, and then the the final movement, it's like dun 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 dun. I can't imitate it exactly, but it sounds like a guy on a porch with a fiddle. It just has kind of that evocative American sound to it. A very tuneful, very fun work. And for this one, I recommend the Smetana Quartet, a Czech group. They recorded this one in 1966. Fairly good sound, and they've just got that flavor to it, that soul that really makes you appreciate the music. It's very beautifully played. It's got a great feeling of buoyancy to it. You can tell that they really have a great feeling for it. So that's my top choice. Another Czech quartet, the Talich Quartet, recorded it in 1976. And this has really the same qualities. Like I said with their Beethoven quartets, they're a very introspective quartet. They always think through the music, and so you get a little bit of that here too, of that kind of really kind of feeling the music very, very deeply. So I wouldn't want to be without this one either. And then another Czech quartet recorded it in 1982. This is the Panocha Quartet. And this one's a little bit more on the zippy side, a little bit more get up and go. That quick, final movement really speeds along. Really immaculately played. So this is another way to hear the quartet that I wouldn't want to be without. And then finally, I want to recommend this one. Same time period, 1986. This time, the Haydn Quartet. Haydn Quartet was really a wonderful group. I don't know if they are still playing today, but their heyday in recordings were like in the 80s and 90s, nice digital sound. They produce wonderful tone, very immaculately, everything's immaculately shaped. So this is a really wonderful version as well. And then his other really famous chamber work is the Second Piano Quintet, Opus 81. This one, it opens with this really cool kind of mellow cello theme, and the thing about Dvorak is he was very connected to Brahms. Harmonically, they were quite similar, but Dvorak was, if anything, a little bit more accessible in his tunefulness. It's just he had just like endless invention for melody and lyricism. So this quintet is full of that. Like the quartet, it has a really zippy finale that you just want to dance to. And then this beautiful ethereal second movement. It's actually a dumka, which is a Ukrainian kind of, I think the word is like means thought or something, but it's kind of this Ukrainian thing that has this kind of ethereal, mystical nature to it, and it's really really lovely. And for this one, I recommend again the Smetana Quartet, joined by Pavel Stepan. I think I have the name right, Pavel Stepan, on piano. Again, from 1966, and again, they just get that flavor, that Czech flavor. The Dumka movement is just gorgeously played. So this is a wonderful version. Also, I want to recommend this one from 1962 with Clifford Curzon and the Vienna Philharmonic Quartet. This is a really beautifully lush, romantic reading, and Curzon just had that wonderful artistic judgment, beautiful touch on the piano. So that's excellent. And then finally, one really old version that I have to recommend is this one, Arthur Schnabel with the Pro Art Quartet, recorded in 1934. That was another one of those old quartets like the Bush and the Budapest that just brought great imagination and artistry. And here they're joined by Schnabel. The final movement is just wonderfully dramatic and exhilarating. So it's one of those that, despite the limited sound quality, I still recommend this one highly. One more work I want to talk about, or set of works for Dvorak, is his piano trios. He wrote 4 of them. The most popular are the final two. Number 3, it's in F minor, and it's really, really dramatic work, lush and romantic. Again with Dvorak, it's just endlessly entertaining music. You don't really imagine going to sleep when you're listening to Dvorak, unless you're really tired, I guess. but he always brings something to just keep your mind listening. And then the fourth one, the Dumki. So Dumki, plural of Dumka. It's in 6 movements, and all 6 are using those Dumki, those Ukrainian kind of ethereal and mystical thoughts. But it's not always something quiet and introspective. It's also often something very energetic and rhythmic. And for this, I recommend the Suk Trio, headed by Joseph Suk, grandson of Dvorak's son-in-law. Recorded in the mid-60s, just beautifully played, very well recorded, and just impeccable in interpretations that you can't go wrong with. Okay, so that's Dvorak. Let's talk now about Gabriel Faure, the French composer. And for Faure, I'm going to talk about his 2 piano quartets and his 2 piano quintets. These are just wonderfully inventive, colorful works. It's just the kind of the prototypical French romantic, colorful. When you want to get away from that sort of heavy German repertoire. Although these works can also be fairly dramatic and challenging, it's really something. The first quartet is the earliest. It's a little bit more of the classical sounding. And then the second quartet and first quintet were written, I think, maybe a couple of decades later, or maybe at least a decade later, where it gets a little bit more involved in sort of a little bit more drama and etherealness. And then that last one, the second quintet, was written towards the beginning of the 20th century, where he kind of even went into a little bit more chromaticism. And they're all 4 wonderful pieces. And we have these recordings from the 80s and 90s on Hyperion from the group Domus. I mentioned Sostowitz, the violinist, and Thoms, the pianist, with the Brahms sonatas. They're in this group. And these are just gorgeous. It's just beautiful playing, wonderful taste. They just have the full understanding of these works and what to bring out. Beautifully recorded. It makes for wonderful chamber music listening, and I can't recommend this highly enough. All right, so that's Faure. Now let's talk about fellow Frenchman César Franck. And one of my absolute favorite works, not just of chamber music, but just of anything, the Franck Violin Sonata. Is this a piece of music or what? It starts out with this very lovely opening with the violin going da-deen, 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 da-da. Very kind of casual and slow, and then the movement kind of builds on that. And then it gets really dramatic in the second and third movements. The first one starts out the second movement starts out really stormy. And then there's just these gorgeous moments where the violin is just kind of floating. Dee-da, 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 and then it just goes up into like this really high register, really heart-stopping stuff. And then also a dramatic third movement. And then he kind of relaxes in that final movement, a little bit like Brahms in his second piano concerto. It's almost like, okay, I've given you so much. Why don't you kind of sit back and enjoy this little dainty theme? It's like da dee da dee da dun da da dun da da dun da da dun. It's just a wonderful work, and another one of those, like I was saying about the Debussy and Ravel string quartets, that if you're new to chamber music, this is probably one of the works you should check out first. It's just really great. My top recommendation for this is a French duo, digitally recorded in 1989. Augustin Dumais and Jean-Philippe Collard, and they just have the full measure of this music. It's just a really spot-on interpretation. The beauty of phrasing, the drama. It's just really, it's a great way to get to know the work when you're first learning it. But as I've said, whenever you have a truly great work, you're going to want a lot of versions, because a lot of people get their 2 cents in, and you know, you fall in love with this version and that version and so on. So one of those is this one from 1980. Polish duo, Kaja Danczowska on violin and Christian Zimmermann, the well-known pianist. And this one, it's got more of a shimmery, pristine quality. It's not as overtly emotive, but it shows you kind of another side of the piece that really works. The beauty of the writing really comes through in a very direct way. So that one is gorgeous. Now, if you do want something a little bit more overtly emotional and lushly played, we have this classic version, Kyung Wa Chung on violin, and the wonderful pianist, Romanian pianist Radu Lupu. This one is a little bit more lushly and romantically played, maybe a little bit quicker in sections. It's a very natural interpretation, and one that I wouldn't want to be without if you love this piece, because the playing is so beautiful, the sound quality is so beautiful. It's really an unaffected, natural interpretation that is a classic for good reason. And then we also have another classic version. From Yitzhak Perlman, coupled with that horn trio that I mentioned for the Brahms, also with Vladimir Ashkenazy, who was on that recording. This is from 1968. And Perlman, I mean, he brings his gifts to this work, the beautiful emotion and the sensitivity, as well as the virtuosity. And you also have Ashkenazy to boot, a beautiful Decca sound. This is another one of those classics that for a piece like this, you're not going to be without. And then we have, just an embarrassment of riches. We have these two guys, a Russian duo. Who were they? David Oistrakh and Sviatoslav Richter. I don't know if anyone's heard of them. Okay, just kidding. Two of the great artists of the 20th century. And it is a live recording from 1968. Pretty good sound, maybe just a little bit noisy, but not too bad. But, oh my gosh, Oistrakh and Richter, two of the giants in terms of interpretation, not just their technical facility, and they really bring it. This is one of those almost kind of emotionally draining performances that really is priceless. So you're not going to want to be without this one either. And then we have this one. The French duo, the old classic version from 1929 with Jacques Thibault and Alfred Cortot. Again, they were a trio together with Casals. This one is fantastic, despite the old sound. Just when you think you've heard everything that you could possibly hear, then you hear this, and you hear these interpretive insights that just are just unassailable. They're just, just the emotion is brought forth in a way that it's obviously they connected with the music, they knew it well, probably had played it together tons of times, and another one of those that you don't want to be without. They come across fairly clearly despite the sound quality, so it's really not to be missed. All right, so that's Faure. Now we're going back to the classical period, to the father of the string quartet, Papa Haydn, Joseph Haydn. I'm just going to cover his Opus 76 quartets, those 6, which are probably his most popular. The nicknamed ones are the ones that tend to be better known. There's the second, which is called the Linz. No, I'm sorry, not the Linz. I'm thinking of Mozart. No, this one's called the Fitz. Sorry, and it's called that because it starts out where it goes down in fits. They really have clever, reasons for nicknaming these pieces. That's a wonderful piece. I love especially the minuet. The minuet is really engaging. It's got some wonderful harmonies, and then the Emperor Quartet. A lot of movement to that first movement, and then it's got this beautiful adagio as well, and then the Sunrise. which starts out, like it's called Sunrise because it kind of starts out slow and then builds and builds. All of these are just wonderful works. Haydn, he was the father of the string quartet. He was the one who created the form, mastered the form, and set this blueprint that lasted for centuries. He really was to the string quartet, I think, what you could say Beethoven was to the symphonies. Even though Haydn also, obviously, you could say he's the father of the symphony too. But the way Beethoven kind of brought it to this higher standard, that's kind of what Haydn did with the string quartets. I would say even more than the symphonies, it's the string quartets where I think if you're going to get to know Haydn first, that's maybe the best place to start. My top recommendation for his Opus 76 quartets is a little bit of an older version, not too much, in 1964, from the Tetrae Quartet. The Tetrae Quartet, I think they recorded all of Haydn's quartets, and they have an obvious love for this music. Just wonderful phrasing, wonderful spirit throughout, a beautiful playing in the slow movements. I just find it to be really engaging. It's maybe just a tiny bit of harshness in the sound, but it's not too much, and it's mainly, you're mainly just enjoying the music, and I think this is a great way to get to know the works. As is this version from the late 80s on Naxos, on the budget label, the Kodaly Quartet. They play with wonderful warmth, a wonderful spirit. It's just excellent interpretations. I'm pretty sure they also recorded all of the Haydn quartets, so that's sort of your kind of budget way to acquire them all. So this is an excellent version as well. Also from the late 80s, we have a version from the Tchaikovsky Quartet. Excellent sound, fairly reverberant. Maybe they're a little bit like kind of more spaced out a little bit. The Tchaikovsky play with a little bit more forward momentum. So if you fancy that, this might be a version that you particularly like. Tchaikovsky always have immaculate playing. And this is one of their earlier recordings as well. So this is not to be missed. And then another version that's a little bit on the faster side, much more on the faster side actually. This is a period version from the Quatuor Mosaïque. A group of musicians who actually are from the Vienna group that Nicholas Harnoncourt founded. So they're very steeped in the period instrument revolution, and these are really exciting, as you might expect. Really wonderfully played, very nicely recorded as well. And so if you want a little bit more skip to the step, you might say, in these quartets, this is an excellent version to get. And then finally, I want to mention the Pro Art Quartet. They were trying to record probably all of them, but they only got through maybe, I don't know how many, a lot of them, the quartets. Out of the Opus 76, they recorded the Emperor and the Sunrise, numbers 3 and 4, and these are recorded in the 30s. And the Pro Artos are just one of those groups, like the Bush and the Budapest, one of these old vintage string quartets that just had this immaculate artistry and wonderful insight and nice warmth to their playing as well. So despite the primitive sound, I would say this is one that's worth checking out as well. Now, for Haydn, I also want to mention a work that is actually originally an orchestral work that Haydn wrote for a church service in Spain that was commissioned from Haydn. This is his 7 Last Words of Our Savior on the Cross, Opus 51, that he then adapted for a string quartet. And this is maybe something that you don't think of as typically Haydn. It's a really particularly emotive work. It starts out fairly dramatically in the introduction, and then you have the 7 words. Each is a different movement, and the words are not actually just a word. It's actually a complete thought that is from Jesus in the Gospels as he's depicted on the cross. Very famous, you've probably heard a lot of them. And so what Haydn did is he depicted them musically, and it's a very moving work. most of them it's fairly slow, which was a challenge because you didn't have your, especially for someone like Haydn who's very classically minded, you didn't have your fast slow. It was a lot of more sort of mellow, very introspective, and very, very beautiful and touching. And then he added this ending, which sort of ends dramatically. Very powerful work. And if you're going to have drama and expression, who are you going to call? The Lindsays. The Lindsay Quartet. They started calling themselves they are called the Lindsays here. I think they switched from being the Lindsay String Quartet to the Lindsays at some point. But anyways, this is from 1992. Very well recorded, and yeah, they give you that. They give you the emotion, the expression. They always put interpretation and communicating what the music is about first. And so, for a work like this, you really can't go wrong with them. I do want to mention a vintage version from the early '50s, however, from the Vienna Konzerthaus. This is a group that also recorded a lot of Haydn, and the expression that they give to this almost kind of romantic sounding expression is very apt for the work, and it's also a great way to hear it. It is a little bit rough sounding, a little bit rough around the edges, so you'll still want to start with the Lindsays, but if you love the work, I would also check this one out. And then finally, for Haydn chamber music, I have to mention one of the classic sets of all time. The Beaux-Arts recording of the piano trios, all of them, which is a lot to get into. These were recorded in the 70s, beautifully played, beautiful sounding, a classic for a reason. I mean, this is just endless goodies. It really is. It's hard to know, give people a kind of a starting point. I would say of course, there's always the named ones are ones that people pick out. So there's the Gypsy, which is H, which is it's kind of like, how there's Kerschel for Mozart. For Haydn, there's H, which is Hoboken. It's H25, but it's actually like numbered number 39, so you might see it numbered whatever differently. But it's a really fun piece. It has this ending that makes people think of like a gypsy dance. That's how it got that name. And then my favorite is especially H28, which is number 44. Really wonderful trio, especially this kind of haunting middle movement. Dee da dee da dee, and I can't imitate exactly how it goes, but the piano comes in dun 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 dee da 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 dun. And Menachem Pressler, the Beaux-Arts pianist, plays it wonderfully. It's got that classical poise and beauty. These are just wonderful works. It's hard to, the thing about it is there's so many of them. It's such a large set. It's kind of intimidating. I would say just pull one out and just put it on and just enjoy your kind of proverbial classical beauty delivered by Papa Haydn. It's just really a wonderful set. Okay, so that's Haydn. Now let's talk about something quite different. Leos Janacek, the Czech composer. What a character this guy was. And his two string quartets are really something else. Janacek, he had his own musical language, very unique. And he had this obsessive crush with, I think she was his student. She was 40 years younger than him, married. Her name was Kamila, I think it was Stoslova, something like that. And he was just obsessed with her. And it was a little bit creepy, but she was friends with him, so apparently she wasn't too creeped out, but it wasn't, it wasn't reciprocated. But anyway, so his two string quartets are both kind of eerie and you might say a little bit strange, but very beautiful and very captivating. I really love these works. The first one is called the Kreutzer Sonata, and it's actually called that not because of the Beethoven Sonata directly, but based on the Tolstoy novel Kreutzer Sonata. So the Tolstoy novel was a story of intrigue and jealousy and anger. It had to do with like this. There was this married. It was a love triangle, and the wife played the violin, so she had an accompanist, pianist that she had this. That's where the triangle came from, and they played the Kreutzer Sonata together. And so the string quartet number 1. It kind of musically depicts that, and so it's got a lot of twists and turns. It's got this kind of sleuth vibe to it, like you're investigating or you're checking out, this kind of jealousy thing, and it's really a cool piece. I really like it. And then the second quartet is the one he dedicated to Camilla. It's called Intimate Letters. I believe he wrote her like a crazy amount of love letters, incidentally. But this piece is sort of like a musical depiction of Camilla. And depending on how you look at it, it's either really sweet or really like, it starts out kind of strangely, in fact. But then you can see how his love for her, obsessive love, is something that really stirred deep within him. She's portrayed by the viola, and it's really beautiful writing. So these two quartets are really an experience. And my top recommendation for this is the Smetana Quartet. Same recommendation I had for the Dvorak Quartet. Unfortunately, it's split across these two Testament CDs. That one of them has the Dvorak American Quartet and the Piano Quartet, recorded in 1965, and they just do a really great job of bringing out the character and the meaning. If anything, even better than in the Dvorak recordings. It's just really wonderfully done, wonderfully played. So you can't go wrong with this. I also recommend that other great Czech quartet, the Talich. And this, you do get them coupled together. This was recorded in 1985, so it's digital sound, so it's a little better. And they also do a wonderful job with the interpretation, wonderful playing as well. So you can't go wrong with either one of these. All right, now we talk about Zoltán Kodály, the Hungarian composer, friend of Béla Bartók, like Bartók, very inventive with his musical language, borrowed from Hungarian folk song. And I want to mention his sonata for solo cello. Now, he did write one also for cello and piano, but this one is the one for just cello by itself. And this is really a wonderful piece. If you like the Bach cello suites, and you like that solo cello sound, and you want to hear something more kind of modern and different, this is really a great one. It's got a full range of emotions, very dramatic, very difficult to play, I would imagine. I'm not a cellist myself, but it sounds difficult. And I have to go with, on a recommendation for this one, fellow Hungarian János Starker, who actually got the endorsement of the composer himself when he played it for him when he was young. And he recorded it, I think, like 4 different times. He does have a very good sounding one on RCA, recorded like around 1970. And that one is definitely recommendable. I think there's a little bit more intensity to this mono recording from 1950. Unfortunately, it's a little bit harder to find. You might want to just default to the RCA because it's more readily accessible. But Starker obviously connected with the piece. It was something that was with him throughout his career. Wonderful playing, very dramatic, very, very, very soulful, very intense. So wonderful way to get to know the Kodály Sonata. Okay, so now we come to Felix Mendelssohn. Oh, I love Mendelssohn. Good old Mendelssohn. He just was just a darn good composer. I mean, great melodies, great invention, great structure. Like I was saying about Dvorak, it's music that it's kind of just easy to lap up. It's never like, gosh, I don't know. Like some of those compositions that are a little bit harder. You feel like you have to kind of, figure out like what's my problem with that, or this. Mendelssohn's, it's just your kind of quintessential romantic composition, and especially his octet. This is another one of those works which I think make a great gateway in general to chamber music if you're new to it. What a great piece this is. It starts out da 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 da. It starts out with wonderful energy. Then a beautiful middle movement, and then the final. Oh my gosh! It just goes at crazy breakneck speed. And then you get towards the end where they all get together and they play bum 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 bum, and it's just exhilarating the way Mendelssohn builds it to that point. It's really one of the most thrilling moments in all of chamber music. And there's lots of really good recordings of this one. My first choice for this is the Academy of St. Martin in the Fields, Neville Mariner's group, recorded in 1968. Really good sound quality, beautiful playing, just immaculate playing, wonderful virtuosity, and just a wonderful overall, just a way to get to know the work. They just really nail it in terms of the tempos, the interpretation. It's just really great. Also, I want to recommend this version from the Marlborough Festival, 1965, with led by Jaime Laredo. Another one where you collect all these great musicians together, and it's just wonderfully played. Great energy, great musical judgment. You can't go wrong with this one either. I'm kind of going quickly through these because the music is so good. It's sort of like this. You could probably find a dozen really, really great versions of this work. I would also mention this one from 1968, the Smetana and Janacek quartets. Again, it's an octet. If you ever have a chance to see this performed live, it's really something to see 8 players combining to create virtuosic music like this. It's really wonderful. But anyways. This one, it's really beautifully recorded, beautifully played. I would say that it's a little bit more emphasizing the lyrical elements, I would say. They don't go as crazy with the tempos as some others do, but it's a really powerful version as well. And then on the other side of the spectrum, if you want something really on the quick side, you got good old Yasha here. Yasha Heifetz from 1961 with a group that includes William Primrose on viola and Gregor Piatigorsky on cello. So a really, your proverbial all-star account. And they do take those quick tempos, especially for that final movement. So you're going to get the virtuosity here. All right, so that's the Mendelssohn octet. I also want to mention his piano trios. Again, just, really inventive, melodic, just good old-fashioned romantic music, just really well written. And my top choice for this one is another all-star group of Americans, led by Isaac Stern on violin, Eugene Isteman on piano, and Leonard Rose on cello. These were recorded in the 60s and the 70s. And they just have a wonderful feel for this music, for the romantic phrasing, very good technically as well. They just really bring out the different elements of the score very wonderfully. I would want to recommend also for that first one, which is the more popular of the two, this old version from our friends again, the old trio, Jacques Thibault on violin, Pablo Casals cello, and Alfred Cortot on piano. This is a really exciting, powerful version that these artists really, really bring forth despite the primitive sound. So that's another great version that I would recommend. Okay, so that's Mendelssohn. Now we are to 20th century composer Olivier Messiaen. We talked before about his Tarangalila Symphony. Very challenging work, but very mystical. It's his own language. And this one is the Quatuor pour la fin du temps, the quartet for the end of time. Now, you may think that means, quartet for when time is ending, but like, so you expect something bleak, but actually that's not what it's talking about. It's more talking about the end of time, meaning like the end of keeping time, where time just becomes endless. It's talking about universality. It's a very religious work, very spiritual work. He actually wrote it, believe it or not, in a prison camp, a German prison camp during the war. And the reason he wrote it for, the instruments that he wrote it for, cat here. Hi, Claude. Claude, do you like Messiaen? Okay. All right, little cameo appearance there by Claude. All right, anyways, back to Messiaen. So he was in a prison camp, and he started out writing like a clarinet part, and he showed it to his friend, fellow prisoner, who was a clarinet player. And then the only instruments they had available were a cello and a piano. So that's how he formed that quartet. It's a really kind of a unique formation for a quartet, but it's a really beautiful work. One of the iconic chamber works of the 20th century, no doubt. It's got like a slow cello in the middle and a slow violin towards the end that depict Jesus. Then it's got some really rhythmic sections, and then also there's this beautiful angelic clarinet solo in the third movement. So wonderful work. And we're lucky to have this fairly recent recording from 2016 with our Swedish clarinetist, Martin Frist, who I mentioned for the Brahms clarinet works, Janine Jansen, one of the great violinists of today, Torleif Thedéen, the Swedish cellist, and wonderful young pianist, Luca Derbagu. Or is it Debag? I'm not sure. I might be butchering that. But anyways, that is our foursome here, and it's beautiful sound, wonderful interpretation. The mystical elements really come through. So that's a gorgeous version of the work that you won't want to be without. I also want to recommend this slightly older one from 1968 with Gervais de Paillet on clarinet, Eric Grunberg on violin, William Pleath on cello, and Michel Bayroff on piano. This is also an excellent interpretation where they obviously connect to the feelings in the work, the nuances, and the ethereal quality of it. And it's really strong as well. All right, so that's Messiaen. Now we have come to Mozart, wonderful Mozart. I'm going to start with maybe his most famous chamber work, most popular one, which, just like Brahms, he was inspired by hearing a clarinetist. His name was Anton Stadler. And of course, we know the clarinet concerto with the famous middle movement. But a couple years before that, he wrote a clarinet quintet, which is also very beautiful, very inventive, very colorful, very melodic. Just a wonderful piece. And for that one, my top choice actually is fairly easy. It's the one that's coupled with the Brahms, the one with Gervais de Paillet and the Milos Ensemble of London. 1964, fairly good stereo sound. And this one, it's mainly the artistry that they bring, the joy, the ebbs and flows, the way they phrase. It's just really brings out the joy and exuberance of the work wonderfully. There are a lot of really good recordings, however. One of them is coupled with the clarinet concerto that I've also recommended. This is with Thea King, and this is with the Gabrieli Quartet, and this was recorded in 1985. Thea King, consummate artist on the clarinet, just wonderful elegance to the way she played, wonderful expressiveness to the Gabrieli Quartet as well. So that's a wonderful version. This one comes from 1980 with the Tali Quartet, and they're joined by Bohuslav Zaradnik on clarinet. This is a really excellent version. It moves really well, maybe slightly swifter, but just really elegant and wonderfully phrased. And then another one I want to recommend comes from the U.S., Harold Wright with the Marlborough Festival. This is recorded in 1968, I believe. And This one has a lot of like this sort of good old-fashioned warmth to it. Maybe slightly more on the romantic side, but nothing wrong with that. We like our Mozart kind of schmaltzed up a little bit sometimes, and they just do it wonderfully. Beautiful phrasing. The sound is pretty good. It's not not too noisy. So this is recommendable as well. And then finally, I want to recommend a vintage version that might interest you, headed by Benny Goodman on clarinet with the Budapest Quartet. This is from 1938. And this one's taken a little bit faster. And Goodman, he had those moves. It really elegant, really smooth, and it really comes across well. It's really a wonderful version of the Mozart Quintet, and then the Budapest Quartet, wonderful artistry as well. So. Difficult sound, it's a little bit noisy, but if you love the quintet, I would also check out this version. Now, if the clarinet quintet is not his most popular one, it's definitely one of them, but you can also make an argument for his string quintets. In particular, the G minor, number 4, it's Koschel 516. And then also the one just before that, the C major one, that's 515, and that's number 3. Those are standouts. And these are just really beautiful, elegant works. But 516, the number 4, that one, it stands out a little bit. It's a little bit, I wouldn't say it's dark, but it's obviously more serious. It's in G minor, and there's a little bit more of a heavy vibe to it, you might say. It's not like overly, it's not like Shostakovich or something, but it's a really lovely work with a lot of beautiful, beautiful and inventive spots, a lot of nice, drama and beauty. So that's definitely one of Mozart's, one of the first works you should get to know with Mozart's chamber music. My top choice for that one is back to this, the Talik Quartet. From the, I believe it's like 1980s or early 90s. And especially in that G minor quartet, the Talik Quartet, they were very, they did great with the, interpretive insights and really thinking deeply into the music. And so they brought those qualities of kind of the dark ruminative qualities to that G minor. And then the others are also wonderfully played. However, have to recommend also this classic version, the Grumio Trio from the early 70s. This one, you get that consummate classical poise and artistry. Beautiful playing, wonderful balance, just wonderfully judged tempos, wonderful sound. It's a classic version for good reason, and I wouldn't want to be without this one either. And then finally, I also want to recommend this version from the 50s from a British quartet, the Amadeus Quartet. These are their famous 50s Mozart recordings. They didn't record the first 2, but they did get the number 3, number 4, and 5 and 6 recorded. And these are just lovely, warm recordings. Not overly romantic in any way, but just beautifully poised. And the sound quality is not, it's not what you'd get from the Philips with Grumio. It's slightly rough. It is mono, but definitely worth it though if you want to hear these works. And the playing is just beautiful. Okay, so that's the string quintets. Now I want to talk about another quintet of Mozart's, the Piano and Wind Quintet. Also, its recording partner, its normal recording partner, which is Beethoven's Piano and Wind Quintet, which he pretty obviously was inspired by Mozart. It's even in the same key of E flat. And these are just charming works. It's a really beautiful combination here in the piano with the wind ensemble. So it's a very they're very elegant works. And my recommendation for These two works are a classic recording from 1955 with Walter Gieseking on piano and the Philharmonia Wind Quartet. These artists just really give us this beautiful interpretation, wonderful poise, and it's been a classic for many decades for good reason. Despite the slightly rough sound, it's a mono sound, but it's still fairly good, and my top recommendation for these works. And then finally, for Mozart, let's now talk about his string quartets. And he was very much inspired by Haydn, and so he called his 6 quartets, numbers 14 through 19, those 6, the Haydn quartets. And those are probably his most famous, well-known string quartets. You've got the number 15 is a wonderful one. It goes ding, dun, 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 dun. I think it's in D minor, not B. Is it B minor or D minor? I'm pretty sure it's D minor. That one's really wonderful. Then you've got the Hunt Quartet. You know, kind of sounds like you're going on a hunt. You got the bugles going. And then the Dissonance Quartet. That might be his most popular quartet of all, number 19. It starts out with this pulsing, kind of slow, and it's got, dissonance, really clever, right? They always find clever nicknames to help us sort out what these quartets are. That's a really wonderful work as well. And then a few years later, he wrote his 20th string quartet for his friend Hofmeister, where it got its nickname. And then he wrote 3 more, the Prussian quartets for the Prussian king. Of these, especially number 21 is really beautiful. I would say that these late quartets, they're maybe not quite as popular as the Haydn quartets, but I think Mozart's personality comes out a little bit more in these later quartets. They're really beautiful, very melodic and lyrical, just really lovely works. For these 10 quartets, my top recommendation is Alban Berg. These are their recordings that were on Teldec in the late 70s. And they just bring their immaculate playing, immaculate taste and judgment and refinement and polish, very well recorded. You really can't go wrong. They are a wonderful guide for Mozart if you're getting to know this repertoire. And then also want to recommend the Quartetto Italiano, who recorded all of Mozart's string quartets. These were recorded in the 60s and 70s, and they have all those Italiano qualities, beautiful playing, immaculate judgment, just nice warmth and tone. Maybe slightly, maybe compared to the Berg, you might say there's a slight bit of more heaviness to it, but not overly so. And it's just such beautiful playing and wonderful judgment throughout that I wouldn't want to be without this either. And then going a little bit further back in time, I want to mention, again, the Amadeus Quartet. I recommended them for the string quintets. This is from that set in the 50s. When I think they did record them later in stereo, and those are very good. But I think they were particularly on in these earlier recordings from the early 50s. The sound is a little bit rough, but the beauty of the playing, the warmth of the playing is so really captivating that I think you forget about it. And it's just really great recordings if you want to love Mozart's quartets. They show an obvious affection for them, and it's just really engaging and lovely. And then, finally, I want to mention as well the Budapest Quartet. These are from the early 50s. They're available in various sources. This is Praha Digital. It's kind of a recent label that's been restoring historical recordings very well, incidentally. And the Budapest Quartet, just like they do with the Beethoven quartets, they just have these wonderful insights and judgment and wonderful phrasing. It's just really impeccable interpretations, despite slightly rough sound. Really wonderful. I also want to mention a couple of their recordings that go along with this Benny Goodman clarinet quintet. They did the Dissonance and the Hofmeister Quartet. This is from the late 30s. If you're going to get this for the clarinet quintet, obviously you're already going to have this. But this again shows those qualities, if anything, even more illuminated of this beautiful phrasing and judgment and really engaging. Okay, so that's the Mozart chamber music. I want to move now to, we talked earlier about Heinrich Biber, virtuoso violinist of the 17th century. Now let's talk about Paganini, early 19th century virtuoso star. And he wrote the 24 Caprices. These works, they displayed, they were created so that he could display all his skills on the violin, not just his virtuoso technical skills, but also, there's like slow movements as well, and different. There's a variety of expression that you find in these works. They're really engaging and entertaining. A lot of people might know the final Capricci, number 24, because it was used by Rachmaninoff in his Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini. Anyway, so for this, I want to recommend a recording from 1958 with Michael Rabin. Michael Rabin, who tragically died young in his mid-30s as a result of a neurological disorder. You mentioned Michael Rabin to violinists, and they kind of go, "Oh, everyone loves Michael Rabin." He had such a beautiful, cultivated tone, this beautiful singing tone that he married to this impeccable virtuosity. And it's really perfect for these works because he can do it all, but then he's also got that extra element of tonal beauty and expression. And then you have the vintage capital sound from the late 50s as well that capture him with great detail and fullness. So it really can't go wrong with it. This is a very famous recording and well worth hearing for these Paganini pieces. Okay, so now we come to Ravel. Now, if you're coming here and maybe skip forward in the video and you want to hear about the Ravel string quartet, I already mentioned that with the Debussy. Those two are joined at the hip. So that one's already done. I'm mentioning now the Ravel piano trio. This is a beautiful work. Really evocative, ethereal, dramatic, really gorgeous work. And for this one, my top recommendation is this one, the Eroica Trio from 1997. This is their debut album. And this is just gorgeous. It's gorgeous sounding. It's a wonderful musical judgment. They make the most of those ethereal moments while also playing dramatically. These are three young graduates at the time from the Juilliard School of Music, and it's really wonderful. This debut recording, it's a really interesting combination of works. They also have some Gershwin works, some more kind of jazzy tunes as well, which kind of goes along with Ravel very well. So it's really a wonderful recording and a wonderful disc for someone if you're new to classical music. And then also I want to mention this more sort of vintage version from 1959. We've talked about them before, the Trio di Trieste. The trio, Italian trio from the Italian town of Trieste. This is really a wonderful version of the Ravel trio as well. Really beautiful, wonderfully judged, dramatic, intense, fairly well recorded. So that's not really an issue. You don't get the crystal clear fullness that you get with the Eroica Trio, but it's still definitely worth hearing if you love the Ravel Trio. Okay, so now let's talk about Schoenberg and his masterpiece Verklärte Nacht, Transfigured Night. Oh, this is such a beautiful piece, just really evocative. Schoenberg, I think it's kind of like if people will talk about Woody Allen movies. Sometimes you'll hear people say, "Oh, I love Woody Allen movies, especially the early funny ones." Well, I can imagine people saying about Schoenberg, "Oh, I love Schoenberg, especially the early tonal pieces," because that's what you have here. This is a piece that he wrote when he was in his mid-20s, and it's still fairly tonal. It's more sort of inspired by Wagner, and this was before he really got into his atonal 12-tone technique later on. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but this work is just gorgeous. It's just really the harmonies he creates. It's really seductive, and one that if you're getting to know 20th century, I guess this is like 1899, but so it's not really 20th century technically, but if you're getting to know more modern works for the first time, this is a sort of a great gateway. And my top choice for this one is one that came out in 1990, the Raphael Ensemble. You might remember them from the Brahms sextets. This is just a beautiful version, wonderful tones, beautifully recorded, and it's just really brings home the music wonderfully. However, I do have to also recommend the version that Schoenberg himself didn't authorize so much as he gave his stamp of authority to, I should say, and that's the Hollywood String Quartet. Schoenberg, by the way, I don't know at what point he moved there, but he did live in the Los Angeles area. In fact, very tragically, a lot of his original manuscripts apparently were lost in the recent fires in LA. But anyway, so the Hollywood String Quartet were able to play the piece for him. Incidentally, they were joined on this recording by Kurt Rare and Alvin Dinkin were the additional players. And this is just it's a really famous version. It's really intense, really committed, really involved. So that's something that you're also going to want to hear if you love the work. The sound is not too bad. It's obviously a little dry. It's a 1950 recording, so it's mono, but it's fairly clear and just a really, really beautiful version. All right, so that's Schoenberg. Now let's get to one of the giants of chamber music, Schubert. 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 The thing about Schubert is he just brought this visceral drama to his works. We're going to start talking with probably his most famous, or one of his most famous. He had a few that are just at the top of the ladder in terms of iconic chamber works. But the string quintet is one that often is mentioned as like the epic masterpiece of chamber music, and it's not so much like he was trying to do something really profound, as much as it's the dramatic narrative, almost like a soundtrack to a novel. In fact, his chamber music is often used in movies. The string quintet is just a masterpiece. It's just really arresting, very dramatic from the word go. And there's this beautiful stillness of the slow movement, and then the finale. It kind of ends like almost with a thud, din-a-dum, like that. It's just drama from beginning to end, and it's just really a wonderful work. And so again, for interpretive drama, I often turn to the Lindsay Quartet, and their Schubert is just wonderful for that reason. It's that palpable drama and commitment to the intention and the feeling of the work. I recommend this box, which contains both the string quintet and the 4 late string quartets. You can also get this, which has the string quintet with the most famous quartet, the Death and the Maiden, or you can get the string quintet by itself. Either way, I highly recommend probably the box. And yeah, they just bring those qualities, that depth of feeling and emotion that just draws you into the music. It's just wonderful stuff. I also want to recommend, for that same quality, a lesser-known group. This is from the late 90s, and it's probably difficult to find, the Wellinger Quartet. They're supplemented on this recording by Bernard Greenhouse. Incidentally, Douglas Cummings is the extra cellist on that Lindsay version. But Bernard Greenhouse from the Beaux-Arts Trio joins them. And this is also a really dramatic version as well, really, really heartfelt. So you can't go wrong with that either. I also want to recommend the Berg Quartet. They the technical wizards, they always play everything with just immaculate detail, beautiful tone, beautiful phrasing. They're joined by Heinrich Schiff, the wonderful cellist. This is a really strong, assertive version that you also can't go wrong with. Wonderfully recorded in the early 80s. A couple of more. We talked about the Schoenberg Verklärte Nacht with a Hollywood String Quartet. That's coupled on this disc with their string quintet from 1951. They're joined by cellist Kurt Reyer. This is a really intense, dramatic version. The Hollywood String Quartet, they never held back. They were so good in the standard romantic repertoire. So this is a classic version as well. Pretty good sounding, despite it being mono. And then you have this one, the Pablo Casals Prates Festival version, including Isaac Stern and Alexander Schneider on violin. Schneider, incidentally, a member of the Budapest Quartet. Milton Katims is the violist. And then joining Casals on cello is Paul Tortelier, the wonderful cellist. So that's an amazing array of stars, and they bring it. This is maybe my favorite version of all of this string quintet. It's a little bit limited in sound, 1952, but you get used to it. And the commitment of the artistry and the heartfelt playing is just really captivating. So that's a wonderful version. And then I also have to recommend this version from the 30s with the Budapest Quartet, joined by Anthony Pini on cello. It's from 1935. Just wonderfully judged, wonderful warmth, wonderful drama. Once you get past the dim sound quality, it's another version that you're going to want to hear. Okay, so that's the string quintet. Now, again, for drama. Listen to Schubert's late string quartets. The 13th, that's the Rosamund. It just starts out with this stark drama. So does the 15th. There's the one movement 12th quartet. But of course, the most famous is the Death and the Maiden Quartet, number 14. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Bum, 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 bum. Anyways. Most of you probably know how that one goes. Maybe the most popular string quartet of all. Just really fabulous. And lots of room for dramatic interpretation. So, of course, again, my top choice for that one is, here they are, the Lindsay Quartet. They just bring home that drama and that commitment. Very well recorded in the 80s. Another very famous version that I have to mention is the Quartetto Italiano from the 60s. Really dramatic playing, really beautiful as well, sumptuously recorded, a standard for this repertoire that you also don't want to be without. And then a couple of single versions, of the quartets. One is of the Death and the Maiden, and this is from the Juilliard Quartet from 1959. Fairly well recorded. Incidentally, I've seen this. This is on Testament, but I've also seen it on RCA. Maybe that's when it was released on LP. So I'm a little confused on that. All I can tell you is it's from 1959, and This is a really dramatic version, just really starkly dramatic. They just play the heck out of this. This is one of those, throw you to the wall kind of interpretations, and fairly clean and clear sound as well. And then this classic from the 30s, the Bush Quartet. This is coupled with an equally great version of the number 15 quartet. This one, it's not as much like hitting you on the head and from the word go as it is just the developing interpretive insights and power that really engage you. It's one of my favorite chamber music recordings, and one of the more famous chamber music recordings ever made. All right, so that's the quartets. Let's talk now about another iconic chamber work by Schubert. This time on the lighter side, the Trout Quintet, the piano quintet. This one is just one to put you in a good mood. It's just very joyful, engaging. Probably the most famous movement is the fourth one, the theme and variations. It starts in the strings, dun din da dun dun din dun dun da din da dun da dun. And then the piano comes in later. It's just really a great piece. My top recommendation for this one is actually with the Budapest Quartet from 1960 with Mieczysław Horszowski. Pretty good sound. And just a really loving interpretation. That's what it is about this recording that I love. It's just really, it emanates that joy and love for the music, and kind of a lush romantic interpretation, but not like heavy. Really wonderful. And then for another one that I highly recommended is this classic Vienna version with the members of the Vienna Octet with Clifford Curzon on piano. 1957. Unfortunately, a little bit of hiss, but very present sound. And they just bring that Viennese elegance. This is sort of the proverbial classic of all classics for the Trout Quintet, and for good reason. They bring that elegance and musical taste, a really wonderful version of the Trout Quintet. I also want to mention this Marlborough version with Rudolf Serkin on piano. It's recorded in sometime in the late 60s, with members of the Marlborough Festival, including Jaime Laredo, for example. And just, again, group of friends getting together for the love of music. Serkin just a wonderful job on the piano. Pretty clear recording, pretty good recording quality, and they just bring it. It's just a wonderful version as well. Couple of more. If you want digital sound, there's this one from 1983 with the Hagen Quartet and Andras Schiff. This is a very elegant, suave interpretation, very beautifully played, obviously beautifully recorded, very, very clear sound. Slightly faster tempos, but not too much. Just another one that I can't fail to mention if you love the Trout Quintet. And then finally, going the opposite direction, way back into the 30s, we have this version, Arthur Schnabel with the Pro Art Quartet. Again, you get a group of musicians together of this quality, even with the primitive sound. It's still a joy to listen to. Just the musical imagination and inventiveness. It's really an unmissable account. Okay, so one more Schubert work to talk about, or actually set of Schubert works, the piano trios. Now these are epic works. They're really long, but they're really wonderful. I mean, Schubert was just he just had a gift for lyricism and melody. Of course, he was the king of the lieder, the songs. The first quartet is really wonderful and engaging, very dramatic. The second movement is just this gorgeous melody. It sounds like it could be a pop song from today, actually. Maybe I'll turn it into a pop song. I don't know. There's that one that Eric Carmen did of the Rachmaninoff Second Symphony. I'm never gonna love again. Da 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 dee da da. Some people might know that one. Anyways, then the second piano trio, that one is just really dramatic and exciting. It's just both of them really real masterworks. And we're fortunate to have this wonderful recording from the late 80s from an American trio. David Golub on piano, Mark Kaplan on violin, and Colin Carr on cello. And they just have the full measure of this music. Just wonderful phrasing, wonderful playing. They bring home the dramatic aspects of it. That second movement I was mentioning, the first trio, is just gorgeously done, very well recorded. So really top-notch version of the piano trios. I do have to mention as well a couple of classic versions from the 30s. One is with that first half of the 20th century trio, the Alfred Cortot, Jacques Thibault, Pablo Casals. This is just on the first piano trio. By the way, you can get them in a box. There's a box that collects, I think, about 3 or 4 CDs worth of their piano trio recordings. That's definitely recommendable. I think there's also an Alfred Cortot icon box you can get. So, there's different boxes. I collected these decades ago in single versions, but it is also coupled with that iconic Beethoven Archduke trio as well. But just a wonderful, colorful version of the piano trio number 1. And then we also have this version of the piano trio number 2 with Rudolf Serkin, Adolf Busch, and Hermann Busch, of course, on cello. This was recorded in the 30s. I think around like 1935. Really dramatic version. Really, I mean, it's one of the iconic chamber music recordings as well. Fairly clear sound, so that's not as big an issue unless you should already get the American trio that I recommended anyways. But if you want to hear another version that really brings home the drama of the piece, you want to hear this one. Okay, now let's talk about Robert Schumann, his piano quintet. Oh boy, is this a wonderful chamber work. Schumann was just such a gifted composer in terms of not just melody and drama and so on, but there's something about Schumann's writing that I always find really immediately appealing. Kind of like Dvorak. It's just... You can't fail to just like immediately get it, and this piano quintet is just a wonderful piece from beginning to end. My top choice for this one is a fairly good sounding one from the mid 70s, the Beaux-Arts trio. And this is coupled with his lovely piano quartet as well. So this is a great way to get both works. Very well recorded, very beautifully played. Everything's beautifully judged. So that's a great version. If you got my top recommendation for the Brahms piano quartets and quintet, then you're also going to get the Hollywood string quartet version of the Schumann piano quintet with Victor Aller. Now this one, okay, it's a little bit rough sounding. It's recorded in 1955 mono, a little bit of stringent sounding in the a little rough sounding in the string sound, especially up high. But it's the interpretation is just wonderful. It's just really engaging. They have that romantic repertoire in their bones, and it's just a really wonderful interpretation that I put right up there at the top. Also, we have another version that is coupled with the Brahms piano quintet. Again, Arthur Rubinstein and the Guarneri quartet. This is your proverbial kind of aristocratic interpretation. It's got that nobility and beauty of phrasing, as well as the power, as well as the drama. That's just really gorgeous. It's a 1966 recording. It's fairly clear stereo. So this is another iconic version. And then a couple of really kind of much older vintage versions. One is with Arthur Schnabel and the Pro Art Quartet from 1934. obviously with Schnabel, with him, you think immediately about romantic piano music, and he and the Pro Art Quartet just really play the heck out of this piece. It's really wonderfully interpreted, really exciting, fairly clear sound actually for its time, and definitely not one to miss either. And then finally, okay, this is like the oldie of oldies. I gotta recommend this version with the pianist Osip Gabrilowitsch and the Flonzeli Quartet. This is recorded in 1924. It's so early that they couldn't fit the whole thing, so they made some cuts. So it's a little shorter. But this is again one of those like romantic music closer to the time of the Romantic era, where they just play it with this wonderful sense of freedom and spontaneity. It is very dim. Don't get me wrong. It's definitely a supplemental version. Don't don't get on me for recommending something in terrible sound. It's the artistry that you want to hear from this that you really you don't hear nowadays. It's really just an innate feel for this repertoire. Incidentally, this same disc has on it a duet between Gabrilowitsch and Harold Bauer of the Arensky Waltz. It's this short little piece. It's a very famous old recording that everyone should hear if they get a chance. It's a really cool piece and a really cool recording as well. Okay, now we come to Shostakovich and Shostakovich's 15 string quartets, which alongside his symphonies, of course, are considered one of his biggest achievements. In particular, string quartet number 8, written towards the beginning of the 1960s, is really the one that especially that you might want to come to first. That's one of the iconic string quartets of all time. It has this haunting opening that goes dun deen dun dun, which actually spells his name. It's like D. So the notes are D, E flat, C, B, but I don't myself understand all this spelling stuff. Like I know that B-A-C-H, Bach, spells something musically, but it's D, let's see, D-S is the E flat, and then C, and then H is the B. So that's Dmitri Shostakovich. It's like a signature of his name. But another thing that's interesting about that is you have this iconic string quartet that starts out with a 4-note motif, kind of sad, dissonant, and then you have Beethoven, arguably his most famous or popular string quartet, number 14, that starts out dun dee dun dun, also with a 4-note motif. I don't know, I find that kind of maybe coincidental, but they both start out with this haunting theme. And then it just becomes really frenetic. At one point, it quotes a theme that we'll talk about later for the piano trio number 2, and then it kind of recedes into this quiet. All of Shostakovich's string quartets are wonderful. He was such a gifted composer with his own musical language. I would say the earlier ones probably show more his more early, kind of more energetic style. Number 3 is a really good one. Very, very rhythmic and colorful. The ones bunched around number 8 are kind of similarly like dramatic. And then towards the end, he gets a little bit more subdued. Number 13, for example, it's a very bleak work, very, very beautiful. And then number 15, which is literally a dirge. It's just mellow, low, funereal, but really beautiful. He had actually planned to write 24. He was thinking of it as 4 sets of 6, but he didn't live long enough to do that. My top choice for the Shostakovich string quartets is it's a little bit difficult to get your hands on. It might be easier to find it streaming. I had a difficult time tracking these down. It's the Taneyev Quartet, which is a quartet that actually premiered his 15th string quartet, I think because a member of the Borodin Quartet, or was it the Beethoven Quartet? Anyways, the quartet he had meant to play it weren't able to, so they engaged the Taneyev Quartet. They were graduates of the Leningrad Conservatory, really one of the great Soviet-era string quartets, named after Taneyev, a composer who was a friend of Tchaikovsky. So, like I said, it's a little bit difficult to track down. I got them all 6 here individually. It wasn't easy. There is a box somewhere. If you were able to find it, hats off to you, because I found it very difficult to track down. But the Taneyev Quartet just do a wonderful job of capturing the character of these works. That bleakness. There's a certain actually reserve to their interpretations that I think really works wonderfully. It's really a chilling effect. And they also have the drama and the wonderful playing too. These recordings come from the late 60s and the 70s, so the sound quality is not a problem. A really famous version, another Russian quartet that knew the composer as well, is the Borodin Quartet. The first 13 were recorded in the 60s, and then the 14th and 15th quartets were not recorded yet, so they were not composed yet. So you can supplement it with this Melodia CD from the late 70s, and these are really famous versions, very dramatic, very soulful. That they have the character down. They did also versions later, part of this set, the Melodia set. You can get them all together. I believe EMI has released also the same exact recordings. They're all wonderful. I think there's just slightly more intensity to the late 60s recordings. But they're all definitely reference versions for the Shostakovich quartets. Another really wonderful version comes from the 70s, the Fitzwilliam Quartet, a British quartet. And these, first of all, wonderful sound, beautiful playing. If you want to hear these quartets played and recorded beautifully, you're going to want this. In terms of interpretation, it maybe doesn't have like that specifically dark Russian soulful character, to the max that you might get with the Borodins, for example, but it's still very communicative and very beautifully played. Wonderful technical skill as well. Not one I'd want to do without if you love these quartets. And then finally, I have to mention as well the quartet that knew Shostakovich the best, the Beethoven Quartet. This was the quartet that premiered most all of them. The recordings range from the mid-50s to the mid-70s. Fairly clear recording, and they just have this really earthy Russian character to them. Obviously, they're very connected to the composer and to the music. So this is also one that is sort of like a reference version that you're going to get for these quartets. Okay, so now let's talk about, for Shostakovich, maybe next to the string quartet number 8, his other masterpiece, the piano quintet. This has all the hallmarks of Shostakovich, of the drama and the sort of mysterious beauty. The final movement, it ends in that, some Shostakovich's works end where it's not happy, it's not sad, it's kind of like this middling thing. And it's got these strings that they move together. It's kind of hard to imitate, but you'll hear it. Anyways, it's a wonderful work. My top choice for this one is coupled with the Piano Trio number 2. Now let's talk about that work. That was composed during World War II. It was dedicated to a friend of Shostakovich that died pretty much indirectly as a result of the hardships of undergoing the war and the invasion from Germany and the rationing. And obviously Shostakovich was very affected by that. But the most famous thing about this trio, the whole thing is really wonderful and very, very emotionally affecting. The final movement brings in this element of macabre. It includes kind of a Hebrew dance. Ding da ding dun dun, dee da dun dun dun. dun 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 dun. It's quoted, by the way, in the Eighth String Quartet. But anyways, this was depicting a Jew who is forced to dance in his grave by the Nazis. So it's a very macabre movement, very emotionally affecting, and just really one of the greatest things Shostakovich wrote. So both of those works, the Piano Quintet, the Piano Trio No. 2, are on this 1990 disc by the Nash Ensemble. Wonderful recording, excellent recording quality. They really dig into the music. It's really just a perfect way to get to know both these works. So I can't say enough about this. I would also recommend for the Piano Quintet this Borodin version with Sviatoslav Richter. So very powerful. It is a live recording. It's from the early 80s, so it's just slightly noisy, but a very powerful interpretation of this work. And then finally, I have to mention the Beethoven quartet version with the composer himself at the piano. This is from 1955. Fairly clear sounding recording, obviously not digital quality, but oh my God, this is a really powerful version of the piano quintet. Obviously, the composer knows his own music, and then he's working with his, kind of home quartet of the Beethoven quartet. But it's just really wonderful. You really need to hear this if you love the piano quintet. Just a great, iconic chamber music recording. All right, now let's talk about Czech composer Smetana, who wrote two string quartets, the most famous of which is the first one called From My Life, and it is just what he says it is. It's autobiographical. The first two movements have his sort of hallmarks of color and beautiful harmonies and his nationalistic spirit. Then the third movement, the slow movement, is kind of a slow kind of love letter to his first wife. And then the final movement is very interesting. It starts out very energetically, but then it suddenly grinds to a halt, and there's this high note in the top violin, and that is a depiction of his deafness, or the ringing in his ears that accompanied his deafness. And then the music kind of recedes, and it kind of is a depiction of the difficulty he felt as his health was failing. And then the second quartet kind of picks up where the first one left off. It's really kind of a disturbed, it's very energetic, but it's kind of a disturbed work, which is kind of reflective of the difficulties he faced as he was deaf and in failing health. For this one, no surprise, the eponymous Smetana Quartet is my top recommendation. This is a 1976 recording, really good sound. And, as you would expect, they dig into the emotions of this music, and they portray it very well. Very good playing, wonderful character. You just can't go wrong here. Okay, now one of my favorite works, the Tchaikovsky Piano Trio. This is just, it starts out with one of those beautiful Tchaikovsky melodies. It goes, dee da da dee, da da dee dum. Dun, 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 and that's in the cello. Then the violin comes in, da, 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 dee, da, da, dee, da. And then later the piano kind of pounds it with these big chords. And then it is the first movement. It's actually a 2-movement work. The first movement develops that theme as well as many others, and it's just this rich, inventive, colorful writing. Obviously sort of on the morose side. And then the second movement is a little bit lighter, kind of lightening the mood with the theme and variations, until towards the end, there's a return, a very dramatic return of that original theme before it's very dramatic before the piece ends quietly. A really, really wonderful work. My top choice for this one, very well recorded from 1990, I'm sorry, 1981, the Borodin Trio. And they have that Russian character, that Russian soulfulness, that lush sound, wonderful playing and phrasing, very well recorded. You can't go wrong here. However, I have to also mention the classic early 50s recording from this Russian powerhouse trio of Emil Galels on piano, Leonid Kogan on violin, and Mstislav Rostropovich on cello. And it is just what you'd expect and more. They just bring that Russian soul and character that really brings home the beauty of this piece and the drama and the power. It's a little rough, of course, being an early 50s recording, but it's just, to my mind, it's really one of the great chamber music recordings. Unfortunately, it's a little hard to find. I think really the easiest way to find it is in a box that features those three artists, which that also contains a lot of great stuff as well. But this is just really wonderful recording. And then I'm going to do something I don't normally do, but it's just so good, and I just love this piece so much. There's a YouTube video that I'd highly recommend. It was recorded in 2009 at a festival, I forgot the name, in Switzerland, but it features Evgeny Kissin on piano, Joshua Bell violin, and Misha Maysky on the cello. And not only do they play the daylights out of it, just really intense and involved, but the photography, being able to see their faces and their hands and everything, just really adds to it. That's another thing I would recommend. If you're new to chamber music, check out that video. It really gives you an idea of what chamber music is like, getting these all-star artists together and this creating this beautiful music, often in a festival environment. Okay, so that's Tchaikovsky. I only have one thing left for this video, and it's not a specific composer, but it's more of a genre, and that's Spanish guitar music, solo Spanish guitar. The first two composers I'm going to mention, actually, they were mainly solo piano composers, but their music was arranged for guitar. So first we have Isaac Albéniz, or Albéniz, I think is how you pronounce it. And he wrote maybe the most famous classical guitar piece of all time, the Asturias. It's part of a set called the Suite Española, which the various movements depict regions of Spain. So this one is Asturias. It's also subtitled Leyenda, which means legends. And this is just such a great piece. I don't know if I can sing it's a really fast piece. It's like you may have heard it before. It's such a popular work. Anyways, I'm kind of paraphrasing how it goes. That's my approximatura one more time. And then a couple of other works from that same set, Granada and Sevilla, very evocative. There's also a work called Mallorca, which depicts this it's kind of a more slow work. It depicts kind of this dreamy, isolated island, really beautiful. So, you can cancel those expensive tickets to the Caribbean. You can just sit around and listen to this instead. And then we also have Enrique Granados, who again specialized in the piano, but his works were also arranged for guitar. His most famous work is the fifth Danza Española, a Spanish dance. This is the Andaluza. It's a real rhythmic and exciting. I imagine really difficult also for the guitarist. And he wrote a lot of really colorful, tuneful works, Valses Poéticas, Tonadilla, which means tune, or I think there's a few of those. And then we have a composer who actually did write for the guitar, Francisco Tárrega. And his most famous work is the Recuerdos de la Alhambra, which means Memories of Alhambra, which is a palace in the Granada region. And that's a really beautiful piece. He uses tremolo, which I imagine is really difficult in the guitar. It's tremolos. Here, I'll kind of demonstrate on the piano. It's like. Our little Godfather for you. Anyways, that's tremolo. You can see it's trembling. Anyways, that's a really cool piece as well. So, on to the recordings. My top recommendation for this repertoire is a beautiful early 80s digital recording or set of recordings from Julian Bream, British guitarist. Wonderful interpretations. You can tell he loves this music and knows the ins and outs. You hear it with really great clarity and depth. It feels like you're inside the guitar. Wonderful artistry, wonderful virtuosity. Wonderful way to know these beautiful works. But I have to mention this legend of classical guitar, Andres Segovia. These recordings come from the mid-50s. They come in various packages. This is an MCA set. I think also Deutsche Grammophon has come out with them. And then like various other labels. But if you hear Segovia and it sounds fairly good and clear, that means it's probably these from the 50s. And that in this includes the Asturias, and a lot of those other works I mentioned as well. But then we also have these recordings from the 30s, which are also wonderful, kind of iconic. I say that there's also a icon box with Segovia that you can get on EMI. But this disc includes Granada, Sevilla, a couple of the others I mentioned. It includes also some Bach transcriptions, which are really wonderful. And the thing about Segovia is again, it's like I was saying about Bronislaw Huberman. It's you get these artists who there's the technical skill, but they know the music so well that the technical part is just secondary. It just serves the interpretation. There's just this naturalness to the way Segovia plays these works that's also unmissable. Okay, so that is it. This is it for our survey of the major chamber music works. I know I didn't get to everything. The chamber music is a vast field, but I hope at least this gives you a beginning in terms of the repertoire as well as in terms of the recording. And with that, I want to say to all of you, have a great day and happy listening.